Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Planning Board meeting for June 16th, 2020. Before we get started, I'm going to read an order. This open meeting of the Planning Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the town of Northborough has been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of the planning board are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows the planning board to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda, by tuning into CAT TV government channels, Verizon Channel 30 or Charter Channel 192, or by visiting the town's website and going to the Department of Cable Access Television and click What's Playing Live. If you're calling in by your phone, be sure to press *9 to raise your hand. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comments. Right now, I'd like to confirm that the board members on the agenda are remotely present and can be heard. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Anthony Zaitin.
Here.
Millie Milton.
Here.
Michelle Gillespie. Michelle, you're on mute. Oh, there you go. All right, and Amy Paretsky.
Here.
Great, thank you. For members of the staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Kathy Joubert.
Here.
Robert Frederico.
Here.
Fred Litchfield.
Here.
We also have David Dineski joining us from KP Law as a member of our town council. David, are you able to confirm that we can hear you?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, just to cover some ground rules here in order to run an effective meeting, I will invite each speaker on the agenda by name to make a presentation and speak to their application. Participants will provide their full name and hold until their name is called. We'll be calling presenters shortly. Each speaker will be asked to mute their phone or computer when not speaking and to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. Those responding will be asked to wait until the floor is yielded to them by the chair. Speakers who wish to respond to the comments of others, taking to themselves. Each vote taken by the board or committee will be conducted by roll call vote. For items with public comment, which we do have this evening, the chair will ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. Once the chair has a list of all public commentators, the chair will call each by name and afford 3 minutes for any comments. And I do believe I neglected to introduce myself. My name is Carrie Martinek. I'm the chair of the planning board. So we will get started with that. First on our agenda, I would like to move to the site plan approval for 400 Cedar Hill Street. And I'm going to check our attendees here to make sure we pull Brian over, Brian Mazzar. David, am I able to bring him up there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Brian. Are you going to be presenting as well? Or are you just on your phone?
No, I'm not presenting. I think just the Dover Amendment was the only issue for this meeting.
Great. Okay, so when we last met, we had talked about, we reviewed the site plan and we had talked about getting an opinion from town council to take a look at the Dover Amendment and inform us a little bit about what that's all about. And we received a letter today. Did everybody receive a copy of the letter from, I believe, David, you had authored that letter?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, is there anything, would you be able to summarize, but based on, I think everybody read your opinion, but if there's anything in summary you'd want to add for that?
The main point of the letter, I think, is that there are a couple of prongs, if you will, for first eligibility and then completing the process for qualifying for the exemption. In this instance, the applicant is identifying the educational use element of the Dover Amendment, and that would have to be the check mark or box, if you will, of a nonprofit educational corporation. And the law is such that if education is something which the corporation is allowed to engage in, it meets that first level, if you will. The second step, though, is that the educational activity is to be the primary or dominant purpose, whatever is the educationally significant goal. And so I gave an example of one case where the land court found no, that was not the case, the YMCA Metro West. And then Attorney Bobrowski had cited in his letter the Timothy Hill Children's Ranch case, which related to a summer camp that was run by a nonprofit religiously affiliated organization, where the court found that the religious purpose and religious education was closely bound up with the camp offerings. It determined that the property would be used for religious and educational purposes, and that the Dover Amendment would apply. So I had offered in my letter that it would be appropriate for the board to inquire regarding the particular activities that are presented here. I believe there was a sample schedule of a month on a week-by-week basis of how the program, if you will, at the New England Football Club facility would be presented. So those, I think, are just fact questions for the board to take a look at in order for it to be satisfied that indeed there's an educational purpose, which is the goal of the activity as proposed.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further clarification needed on that from any board members or staff for that matter?
Millie Milton. So I'm just curious, are you saying for David, are you saying we should get a sample of the month of their activities, or was there one included?
There was one included with the letter that Attorney Bobrowski had authored back at the end of 2019. That was in the package that he submitted to Mr. Federico. I don't know if the members have all of that material at their disposal. I think I had presumed that you did, but perhaps not. That is not the case.
I did not get that, so I don't know if anybody else did.
It's probably somewhere in a pile, only because it came, I think, back in March, end of February, March.
Okay.
The information from their attorney.
Okay. If it would be possible, could I take a look at that? Because I still think that the educational use on this seems pretty loose, and I'd like to see if I can be convinced otherwise.
Yep, I can send that out. Depending on when we get through tonight, Millie, I can, send it out tonight or tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
You sent it to me too. I do have the whole booklet that we received I have a whole booklet on 400 Cedar, but I don't see the information about the educational part.
Well, Brian, would you be able to speak to maybe so that we can get a sense, what that calendar looks like? Do you happen to have that, just to kind of give us a rundown so maybe we can think about it now?
I don't have it right in front of me. I can talk in broad scope in terms of what our activities are, if that helps.
Would that be helpful to the board to hear a little bit more about the activities?
I think, I mean, it would be helpful, but I think that I still would like to see really what component of the timing is under instruction and education, because I mean, it still looks to me like it's a fitness center or a sports center. So I want to make sure I can see where that's delineated. And I'm not sure that just having a summary of that would be good, but would be enough.
So Carrie, I had a question for David.
Sure.
My question is, when you started to talk about this, you mentioned that there were two cases. There was the YMCA case that was out of Metro West YMCA, and then there was this other case of the school, which had a religious and an education component to it, and that at that point they felt like that was definitely qualified. Why was it turned down on the YMCA? Can you shed some discussion about that, or just the reason why that was turned down for the YMCA?
I think that the shortest way to put that is that the court found that while there may be some educational component in teaching children to do certain outdoor activities, or even to engage them a little more on a mind level as opposed to a body level, that the inquiry needs to be a little larger, if you will, to see if, as a whole, the purpose for which the property is being used is for an educational purpose, so that it amounts to an educational use. And that's an example of the proposition that you do have to look at each particular case on its own facts, because one might say at first glance that these two kinds of operations might be similar, but the particular facts that the court found in the Timothy Hill Ranch case were that the religious component of the instruction and the camping experience was an inextricable part of the whole program that was being offered, whereas the court in the Metro West YMCA case did not see that to be in existence, and really found that this is more like a typical physical activity or camp type activity use.
Okay.
Terry, if it helps you, if I could share my screen, I do have the sample calendar up on my screen.
Sure, please do. Are you able to do so? Do you have the functionality? Can you see that? Share screen?
I'm not sure how to do that, but I have it on my screen.
Oh yeah, just click share screen, and then whatever, you see that it's like a green button at the bottom.
Yep, 1 second. No, I don't see that. Let's see.
Gary, does he need to be made a panelist before he can do that?
He does.
I think he is a panelist. David is, are you still on the line, David?
I am, yep.
Okay. Is he not a panelist right now?
I'm looking right now. Bear with me.
Okay.
I don't see him as a panelist.
Well, Brian, did you just call in with your phone, or are you on your computer?
I'm on my computer.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to promote him. Here we go.
Now do you see the special abilities?
Okay, looks like he's just coming in on mute. There we go.
Okay, here it is once again. Yeah, can you all see that?
Oh yeah, thank you.
Perfect.
All right, so that for those of you, oh, I don't know if I'm on mute. For those of you that may have the packet, what Brian is showing, it's as Exhibit 2 in the packet, if anyone does have that in front of them.
Okay. Okay, do you want to talk to this at all, Brian, or?
I'd be happy to.
Sure, thank you.
So again, a little bit about what we do. We provide training. It's for youth soccer programs, starting with age 7, going to age 23. We have 2 major goals as a club. One is develop kids so they can play at a higher level. That typically means at the college level. And secondly, we have a large philanthropy program where we work with underserved communities to provide the opportunity to both play soccer and ultimately play at the college level and get scholarships. So what you'll see here is a combination of both classroom training and on-field training. And again, we're not renting our facility out to other clubs or other organizations. So it's not like a fitness club. This is strictly used for our club. So every night, typically players come in, they have a training, about an hour and a half of training. And then there's 30 minutes of classroom work. Classroom work, depending on the age, it could be a college process, it could be high school, it could be middle school. We run a variety of leadership training programs for our kids. I mean, these are kids really at a very high level, so most of them do go on and play at the college level. We do run showcases where we bring in, for one example, is we bring in over 100 preparatory schools from all over New England. Our players come in, they meet with the coaches and the staff of the preparatory schools. They watch them play. And every year we have between 30 and 40 kids that then play at the prep schools. We do say the same thing for kids ages 16 and above at the college level. So we bring in over 100 college coaches that are scouting players who meet with those players. They have an educational session where they talk about the process to apply to college at both Division I, Division II, and Division III. We provide software for our senior players where they look for the appropriate school to play at and appropriate school to go to. And it looks at things like financial aid, educational testing, as well as the soccer ability. So it's really multi-purpose what we're doing with these children. It's more than I think maybe what's in your mind, which is, you know, kids come, they play and they leave. That's really not what we're about. These kids spend a significant amount of time with our staff. We also provide training and coaches education for our staff. So our staff gets licensed. It goes up to an international A license. We provide that at the facility. So we'll be training our staff in their trade, which is, you know, how do they work with youth players to develop them to get to the highest level. So that's a kind of a quick snapshot of what we do. But basically every player who comes in also has classroom time. We do encourage our players to come in and get their homework done. Some of these kids are driving an hour and a half to come to these training sessions. So we do have them sit down and make sure they do their homework. And they do that in the classroom. You know, part of our plan, if you look at the site plan, is we have a large classroom, and that's really dedicated for these activities.
Okay, any specific questions from board members?
I guess mine would mostly be to Dave Daneski because he's our legal counsel. With what he just heard, would he feel that that is enough to fall under the Dover Amendment? Like, I wanted to put my faith in our legal counsel to make that decision because it's such a, the Dover Amendment is such a big item. I didn't want to set precedent if, you know, I read different cases too, and some counted, some didn't. So I was hoping to get the answer from him.
Madam Chair, I can respond to that.
Sure, please do.
So what was just presented is not anywhere in writing with that level of explanation in the materials that I saw. And in my view, in order for the board to have a level of comfort that what was described is more than just coming in and playing and leaving, to sort of paraphrase Mr. Mazar's description, I think it would be appropriate to have written curriculum or similar type materials that explain what's on that schedule, because the schedule by its nature is just sort of snippet words and doesn't give the level of detail that was just offered. So as I said earlier, each case depends on the particular facts, and I think that what was just described is probably one of the critical elements in making an ultimate determination here. So first, it'd be a question of, does the program as just described orally exist in a written form, and what materials are there that demonstrate that and describe the particular experiences that are offered to the participants.
Brian, do you have this in a written form, or is there a curriculum on file or anything like that? Backing?
Yeah, I mean, for every program we run, there's a curriculum. I just don't want to overwhelm you with paper. I mean, there's a large document on the college seminar process. There's a large document on health and nutrition. We do a lot of injury prevention. There's a lot of information on that. There's a whole bunch on terms of the college process and leadership training. I mean, as you can imagine, we run these programs for 40 to 45 weeks a year, and every session we run has an itinerary and an agenda with it. So it might be easy for me to give you sampling, because literally I could send you hundreds and hundreds of pages on what it is that we're actually providing. I just don't know how much detail you want. Like I said, I mean, there's probably 1,000 pages if I would include everything that we do for our players.
Okay.
I'd be happy to, maybe the best thing to do is send you some samplings of what we do, you know, and you can see that. But again, you let me know when we send you, I'll send you whatever you need.
What timeline wise, Brian, I know that you're on a short one. So how does this impact, what is your timeline in terms of our next meeting's not till July. So
yeah, so our due diligence process runs out at the end of June. So the seller of the property as of June 30th has the ability to walk away from our purchase and sale. We signed the purchase and sale over 6 months ago. Normally you have a 3-month period to do the due diligence. They extended to a 4th month. With everything going on COVID-19, he agreed to extend it to the end of June. I think we're at high risk that the seller will walk away if we don't do this by the end of the month.
okay, just a general, I guess, straw poll in terms of how does the board feel, comfort level that this does satisfy based on the material sent over, based on what town council has said. I just like to gauge the temperature of the board at this time. If you'd like to share, I guess I'm just going by the order I see you. Michelle, do you have a?
Yeah, so there's 2 questions that we still need David to answer. One of them was the reason, David, that the board called on your advice was that a member of the community asked that if it was approved under the Dover Amendment and then it was sold, does that transfer with the property?
The protection is not personal to an owner. It's based on the use of the property and whether a particular owner qualifies under the statute, being in this instance, as presented, a nonprofit educational corporation.
Okay.
So if just as an example, if presume this is deemed to qualify and another entity were to acquire the property who engaged in the same kind of activity and was also a nonprofit and eligible for the protection, then it could continue.
Okay. And then the second question I have is, so the town of Northborough has its town meeting in July. On the warrant article with the planning board, it's an allowed use now in that district for what this applicant is proposing. If they would wait till July, it would be an allowed use, but I don't think that helps them with the nonprofit status. Is that correct?
If the use were allowed, it would be allowed regardless of the status of the entity engaging in the use. In other words, if this kind of a facility is a permitted use under the amendment and the amendment is approved, then any type of entity would be allowed to engage in that use, unless I'm overstating the scope of the amendment. But if the use is allowed, the type of user wouldn't be required to, that would not be a test, is what I'm saying.
Okay. And then at town meeting, which I believe it's like July 11th, if it's voted and approved at town meeting on July 11th and we were to meet a week later, then, I mean, we don't have to wait for the Attorney General to approve everything, right? It's approved at town meeting. So
Any action would be subject to the approval, but when a zoning bylaw is passed, it will be deemed to have been in effect from the time of the posting of notice. So the authorization, if you will, that the amendment would create would be in existence, but the confirmation of that does require waiting for the Attorney General, so that anyone who relied on the amendment arguably would be proceeding at risk until such time as the Attorney General's approval is given. And that's unfortunately just a function of the way the timing of the process works.
And just because I know you work with us on town meeting, do you have any guidance this year, whether that will be delayed because of the COVID? We usually get a response back fairly quickly.
The response period for the spring town meeting season, which although the calendar sort of says otherwise, we are now in, tends to be, I would say, 60 to 70 days. And it really all depends on how the approvals come in. At this point, there haven't been that many town meetings, but by July 11th, there will have been, I think, a substantial number more. So you can always request a particular action be accelerated, but that's not anything that can be assured. And in fact, the Attorney General's office wouldn't be obligated to say, yes, we'll take packet 21 sooner than we'll take packet 2. One point that can be made if you had that kind of discussion is to point out whether the amendment in question is simple or complicated. In this instance, if you're just changing what is an allowed use, that typically is not something that requires that much oversight, if you will, at the Attorney General's office.
Thank you.
So what does that mean for your temperature on this, Michelle?
So I think the applicant, although, you know, it is an industrial area with a, so I'm not quite sure how many other potential buyers are looking at that property at this point in time. The applicant could request a 60 or 90-day extension and then have it go through town meeting, which is pretty much less than a month away. But then again, like David said, I don't know who's representing the applicant, but it's not guaranteed at that town meeting. I mean, there's 60 days for the Attorney General to approve it. But, you know, I'm not sure if they have potential candidates looking at the property where, you know, if he doesn't get approval tonight or within the next couple of weeks, he could lose it. I mean, I think we're all supportive of it. I just think it's, we know that use will be approved in less than a month. So I'm sort of on the fence, and I'd like to hear what everybody else has to say.
Okay. Amy, do you have a temperature reading on whether you feel comfortable this satisfies Dover Amendment?
It's super hard for me because I agree with Michelle. Like, if the applicant can get even 30 days, I do think on the 11th, this will be passed easily because we're going from a no to a yes, industrial, allowing indoor soccer or indoor sports. Like, I love soccer. My daughter played soccer her whole life and she played club soccer. So it's not that I don't like it. It's not that I don't want it there. I have a hard time because allowing the Dover use sets a precedent and it opens it up. And this is perfect because it's an industrial, but the next person who comes along could be in residential because a Dover amendment can go anywhere. So they can say, okay, well, you allowed NEFC, the Dover amendment. I'm now MPS. And I see this big site in residential, and I also want the Dover amendment. And how do you say yes to one and no to the other? Because I think if it's a Dover amendment, it won't matter if it's residential or industrial. So I guess that's the hard decision I'm having with this. I like the use, I like the area. I just see it 11 days to July, it will be allowed. And that would make me feel more comfortable. I'm just concerned with the Pandora's box that it could open, and maybe it won't. But there are so many instances where we've seen it happen. So I don't know. Actually, I was just hoping, like I said earlier, that legal counsel would come in and say yay or nay, but it's really, we're still on the fence. So
Anthony, temperature reading?
my
So
temperature,
again-
oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I cut you off, Amy? Did you have something else? No? Okay.
So I am as equally torn. I mean, I think it's a good use. I think that it sounds like they have great programs. I like the fact that they're reaching out to the underserved. And the whole thing about this being, it'll go through a town meeting in July. And I'd hate to jeopardize these guys from, losing the property. But I don't know, does it set a precedence or does it not? I think the Dover Amendment in itself has a lot of leeway no matter what. And I think even if we were to approve this, if another applicant came along with a legitimate Dover claim and wanted to go into some, I'll say inappropriately zoned area, I don't know, maybe Dave, you can chime in. Would this set a precedence in terms of, allowing this, and then something else came along that wanted to use Dover for, educational and religious reasons in an area that wasn't really ideally zoned for it?
Madam Chair,
Yes, thank you.
if there were another proposed use of the same type as this one having been approved, then that would be a basis for the next proponent to say that if the use is the same and the protection was found, then that next proponent is entitled also to the Dover Amendment provision.
Okay.
And that again sort of reemphasizes the point that the particular facts are important. And that was why I had asked about what written materials there are that demonstrate the program and curriculum in more detail than we have, because on the record now, in the written record, we really only have that one-page schedule sheet.
Okay.
With all due respect, if I just ask a question of Dave. Dave, in terms of precedent setting, isn't it the precedent setting in the whole state of Massachusetts, not necessarily in the town of Northborough?
Would you like me to respond,
Oh,
Madam
yes,
Chair?
please. Yes, that would be interesting. Thank you.
I believe the question was, and I think the appropriate question is, would the action of a particular board in a particular town with respect to a particular type and nature of use be viewed, or could it be argued to be a precedent for that same board in the same town on the same type of use proposed by another party? And that, in my view, the answer is yes.
Okay. All right, Millie, temperature reading from you? I think you originally had asked the question. What's your temperature based on what they?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I see you now.
Okay. Yeah, this sort of brings to some of the points that I had some concerns about, is whether or not it could set precedents, because it seemed pretty loosely interpreted. The fact that we're under seemingly a bit of a time constraint makes me a little bit nervous, because I don't want to make a decision without doing due diligence on this. And I would definitely like to see more of some specific instructional details. I think that is helpful. I was just curious as to what the reason for having it under the Dover Amendment to be exempt was originally in the application, and is there any way to pull that out of this site plan, out of this application, or does it have to be part and parcel with it?
So Brian, I think that question's for you.
I mean, again, we applied under the Dover Amendment because there's an allowed use under the Dover Amendment. It was really meant to speed this along so we wouldn't have to go through the whole town meeting process. I am very concerned. I've already got 2 extensions to our due diligence process, and the seller is very anxious. I mean, if they were willing to give me more time, I wouldn't feel the anxiety I feel right now. But we've looked for the right parcel for 5 years, and I know while he was under contract with us, he did have another offer.
So the original approved use under the Dover Amendment, how was that presented to you guys? Was that something that your counsel suggested you do, or?
Yeah, our counsel suggested, and then he said the normal process is you take it to the building inspector. The building inspector will either approve it or not approve it. The building inspector approved it probably 6 months ago. We haven't really heard anything about the Dover Amendment until now.
Yeah, the only thing is that my concern is that when that happens is, I believe that's supposed to be for informational uses only, not for actual decisions, but I could be wrong. And I think that's, I'm not sure if that's where things sort of went sideways or a little bit awry on that. Am I misunderstanding what that interpretation is?
I think, Kathy, did you have your hand up? I can only see certain people at certain times.
Yep, that's okay, Carrie. I just wanted to, Millie, this doesn't so much address your question, but I can in a second for that. But I just wanted to point out to the board, and again, this is just all about process, is that if the applicant, and again, this is entirely a board's decision, but if the applicant did wait for town meeting, and again, town meeting could say yes, town meeting could say no. Given the environment right now, somebody could make a motion to, pass over several articles, whether it's zoning or other articles, because they don't want to be in a crowd, so there's a lot of variables that could happen at town meeting. So even though we all think that this, myself included, that this is a slam dunk for a zoning amendment, this is probably one of the easiest ones that the board has ever presented, but still there is a risk to that. But then just so that the board knows, the applicant would have to, that if that was approved, if the use was approved at town meeting, and you wanted the applicant to wait till then, they would then have to, refile a new application as a site plan approval. So right now their site plan is wrapped up in this application that's presently before you. So whether you proceed with this or not, but just for a second, if you did, you would be approving, the use and the site plan. It's been through design review, and so you would be approving, what would be before you, or what is before you, is the site plan approval along with this use falling under the Dover Amendment. So just so that everyone knows, including the applicant, they would be filing again. I'm sure it would be expedited because you've already seen everything, and I doubt that the site plan would change it all, but just to let you know that.
Okay. Can I?
And then I think, I'm sorry. Yeah, Millie, I think as far as your question, and maybe Bob will want to jump in, but what Bob does with those forms is they're very clearly a zoning interpretation form. And so that's, pretty much the first step that people start with is describing to the building inspector what their proposed use is, and then Bob outlines what the process would be.
Mm-hmm. I have some concerns with, it's when their counsel suggested using the Dover Amendment to quote unquote speed the process along, so they didn't have to go through this, and that sort of makes me worry that they thought that this was going to be just kind of just put right through without really having to explain what's going on.
Bob, do you have anything to add? I couldn't see you. I don't know if you were raising your hand at all.
I'll chime in here. Very back at the beginning, when they came to me with the zoning for the Dover Amendment, At the time, you folks were working on the zoning amendments for the town meeting to make this an allowed use. I told them that. And they know that very much well, that any kind of vote at town meeting is at best 50-50, and there's no guarantees. And my opinion and my take on it is they felt more secure by going through the Dover Amendment. So they wrote the letter, they took that approach. I made the interpretation that they were correct. Obviously, it's your option to go to town council for further details and let it go where it may. You know, I'm a little confused as to why you're so worried about a Dover Amendment use when you folks were writing the proposal to make an allowed use as a by right.
Well, if I can speak, it seems that the Dover Amendment here is being used as a workaround to a process that's in place.
With all due respect, that's what the Dover Amendment is. In plain English, it's a workaround so that they can put a religious or educational use anywhere they want, and it's federally protected. Okay.
Yeah, but it's open to interpretation on that too.
Well, it will have to be fought out in the courts, because if they fail to get what they want through the Dover Amendment, they could very easily take the town to court, and a judge is going to have to decide on your behalf.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just want to, I think,
agree.
Amy, I keep seeing your hand. Sorry, I'm trying to see everybody. Amy.
Well, I guess I was listening to Millie and Bob, and the thing that makes a difference is where Bob says we were working on an amendment to allow indoor recreation and industrial. That's true. And I think it's a perfect location. But if we set the Dover Amendment, it can go anywhere. Like it can go in residential, it can go in commercial. And so it's setting a precedent, not that it goes in industrial. It could be any sports facility going in any neighborhood or any location. I guess that's my issue. When we were doing the amendments for town meeting, we thought indoor commercial recreation was great for industrial. And I don't want to set a precedent that it's great in every location.
You don't have that choice.
Well, I know I'm talking about town meeting for writing the bylaws. But if we did deny it and it did hold up in court, then it would be also a precedent that it couldn't go just anywhere. So, I mean, it's not a choice it's a choice, you know, if we think it meets the educational, that's a decision we have to make.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, if knowing that it's coming up at town meeting, and listening to Kathy say that you would have to file, but it would most likely be expedited. How do you feel about that? Do you think that your seller, knowing that it's a by right use and that you don't really need to go through the permit process, would that be something that makes that, you know, wraps it up a little?
No, I'm very concerned. Like I said before, I'm very anxious about this, and I'm very disappointed. And yeah, I kind of wish that town council and my attorney had a conversation. I didn't realize we were going down this path. My attorney feels very strongly that this meets the Dover Amendment. He had earlier said to have him on the call, and it didn't sound like it was necessary. I should have done that. It was my fault. I am very worried. It's not so much we're trying to short circuit the process. I mean, I live in a small town. I know how the town process works in town meetings. There's always uncertainty around that. And I think there's a high likelihood if this goes town meeting, we will lose the land.
Okay. David, could I ask you, based on what the information that we have now, without having the benefit of curriculum. Oh, Fred, did you have something? Fred? I'm sorry. Oh, I thought you had something. David, if knowing what we have here, look, you had suggested looking at the calendar. We looked at the calendar. We don't have the curriculum. Would you advise the board that we have enough to make a decision with what we have, or would the advice be that we don't actually have enough information to make an informed decision?
I think that that's somewhat a subjective question, depending on which members' approach or eyes are used. Certainly, we have a lot more than we did. And I think that the recitation of the program was helpful. But, in any hearing process such as this, you do want to have a record. And while there's no reason to believe that the documentation that was described doesn't exist, it's not in the record right now. We have the statements. As a matter of law, you could make that decision if you're satisfied with what was described to the board tonight, and you'd want to put that in the record, because I think what's important is that there be a documentation of those particular elements of this use that are sufficient to qualify it for the Dover Amendment, if that's the decision that the board makes. And so, again, the details are important.
Okay.
Carrie, could I just say one more thing? I'm sorry.
No.
Again, as part of the process, when we first met with the applicant and his attorney, one of the things as staff that it's not that we offer it, but we, discussed that the Zoning Board of Appeals, that our town, does do use variances. And so we provided them with information that I believe it's definitely 2 times, there might even have been a 3rd time, that over the course of the past few years, the zoning board has approved a use variance for indoor recreational use. Different than this football club, but one was a bouncy house. Years ago, Teamworks on Otis Street. And I believe there was a 3rd one. I just can't think of it right now. So we explained to them that, 3 for 3, the Zoning Board of Appeals had approved a use variance, and that was a process that they could also go through. And they explained to us that they didn't want to do the variance process because it's risky, and also because, again, the Dover Amendment exists for this type of use and this type of process. And so that was one of the reasons why they chose to, apply for the Dover Amendment.
Okay, so just quickly, if there are any, is this a public hearing or a meeting?
No, it's a public meeting.
Oh, okay. Is there, in the past, we've approved site plans with things that still have to be passed in at some point. Is the documentation that Brian's describing can be documented as part of this file after the fact? Is that legal to include as part of does that make it part of the record? If there's a condition? No, you can't do that.
Well, I think you as a board, if you want this documentation, you then need to make a decision about that documentation as to whether or not that documentation satisfies you that this is in fact this nonprofit educational use. So it's really not to stay. Sometimes we'll leave a condition open that, per final approval of the fire chief or per final approval of the town engineer. So that's easy enough to obtain in the process, because they really can't move forward, with the building permit until they get that final approval. But in this particular case, I think based on especially Millie's questions, that you want to look at, you're asking for documentation so that you can make a determination about it.
Okay.
Carrie? It's Michelle.
Oh, hi, sorry, Michelle. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So just to recap what I'm hearing. So Amy asked David a question about, I'm concerned about, given the criteria that is set forth tonight with the soccer association on education, that would this happen, could someone else use this again in a different area of the community, maybe not as appropriate as we thought that this area of industrial land was appropriate. Can they use this? And he said yes, because it sets a precedent given the amount of materials that's before us, right? With me is very limiting, which is the first reason I asked the question, which is why was the YMCA denied? So to me, I feel like this almost falls a little bit more under the YMCA than it does the other applicant who was approved, who was religious plus education. So I think if the board is going to move forward, they would need to see that component, because right now we're just looking at a schedule. We don't have all the data before us. And again, I still think that if the process works out, he will be approved at town meeting and could move forward. My concern is in the future, given that we're giving just a sample of a schedule, does that qualify enough for education to approve this? And are you approving something that down the line, residents will come back and say, why did you ever approve that? Because now they're trying to do it over here, which is not a suitable location. Using the Dover Amendment in a different location.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about religious plus educational, I'm talking about educational. This is an applicant who's coming forward just educational and showing a sample of what their week looks like.
Okay. So are there any other comments from the board or staff or town council?
I agree with Michelle with what she said. I think it's opening a door that we need the documentation at least.
Any other comments from staff or the board? Okay.
No, I don't.
Okay, I don't see any hands. All right, so our options at this point are, I can call for a motion and we can vote on what we have now. Based on temperature, it doesn't sound like that will pass, but we can certainly, anybody is welcome to make the motion. We can continue to July 7th to get to continue on the Dover Amendment path and get the additional documentation and then decide July 7th. Or we can continue to July 21st after town meeting. Perhaps at that point, the applicant would have the opportunity to withdraw this application and apply for a site plan it's by right. The use will be by right.
Or you know what I'm thinking? I'm just thinking of this now, Carrie. They could, if they wanted to do that July 21st option,
Yep.
they could amend their existing application. So it would no longer be for a Dover amendment, it would just be straight site plan. So you have everything.
Okay, so you don't have to go through everything
Yeah.
again. No
Yeah,
refund.
I think we could do that.
Okay, so options, we call for a vote. We continue to July 7th with the Dover, continue on this trail, asking for documentation, or we continue to the 21st. And I guess you could do any option at that point. You could stick with Dover Amendment or amend your application by right use. So I guess I'll ask Brian, do you have a preference of those options?
We'd still like to continue on the Dover Amendment. I would request we would include our attorney, or maybe have our attorney talk to your town council between now and the next meeting.
Okay, so in that case, we would continue. We could continue to July 7th. Right? Is that the next meeting?
Yes. Yeah, and you haven't determined, we would need to do that now, obviously, if you're going to continue, what time you want to start that evening. I mean, again, we have to keep that time frame of 9:30 adjournment. So whether, there isn't anything else on the agenda right now for July 7th, as far as, public hearings.
So 6 or 6:30, I don't have a preference. 6, okay?
I can do anything.
Brian, is that okay?
Yeah, 6
Brian,
is
is that
fine.
okay with you?
That's fine.
Okay, so if we want to continue on with Dover, I think we need to do a couple of things. Specify the documentation that we're looking for so that we don't have to run back and forth, like exactly what we want so that the applicant's clear. And we also need to approve a waiver on one of the reports that the applicant had requested regarding, Kathy, do you have the exact report that we need a waiver for, the one with the trees over?
Yep, Carrie, if you want, you can keep talking while I look it up.
Okay, so in terms of exact documentation, it sounds like we're looking for what's behind this schedule. Is there a curriculum? Is there, anything that supports, I guess, what sits underneath the schedule? Sounds like what we're looking for. Does that sound like everything we are looking for?
Yeah, I would say so.
So the waiver, Carrie, is from the planning board rules and regulations which pertain to the site plan. And this is regarding the nature, location, and size of all significant existing natural land features including but not limited to trees, shrubs, or brush masses, specimen trees, and all other trees over 10 inches in diameter. So
Is
that's
there-
the waiver that they're requesting, is that they don't have to show that. And they go on to explain that the existing tree line is shown on the plans. All the trees within the limit of work will be removed, and all the trees outside the limit of work will remain. So they request that waiver.
Okay. Is there anyone on the board who does not wish to approve that waiver? Any comments on that waiver?
No objections.
Just to remind you that you're only going to have 4 board members for July 7th.
Yes. Yes.
So you aware of that?
I forgot.
Well,
I'm just recommending the board continue to July 21st.
what do we have on the 21st, Kathy?
I can't get to my screen. I think right now there's, I actually don't think you have any. Oh, on the 21st is 0 Bartlett. So
Okay.
you do have one hearing that you continued.
In the event that it passes a town meeting and for some reason after they say they want to amend their site application, that can be done pretty quickly, correct?
Yes.
So in that case, they'd actually have both options. On the 21st, they could decide to stick with Dover amendment, they could amend, but you can't switch in flight. You can't come to the meeting and then decide to amend it, or can you?
Well, it's not, no, they would have to, submit, just what we've had people do in the past is, submit a cover letter explaining what is changing or why they, and why they want to amend their application. So, and then that, needs to be supplied to the town clerk. So, they could essentially, I guess, decide that after July 11th, assuming town meeting, happens July 11th. I understand, or I believe there's a rain date of July 18th. So even if the 11th isn't a go, the 18th is a possibility. So that, again, that's still before your meeting on the 21st.
Okay, so so we won't have all of our board isn't present on the 7th. The next possible option is the 21st. Do we have, is there a motion for a waiver on the report? Is there a report number on that? Do we refer to it as something?
For the waiver, yeah, it's section 7.2.C9. And that's in the planning board rules and regulations.
Okay.
And then if you are talking about the 21st, you agreed to continue 0 Bartlett Street to 6 o'clock. So you're starting at 6 o'clock on the 21st.
Okay, so first, why don't I ask for a motion to, let's see, to grant the waiver for the requirement to show trees according to Plain Board Rules and Regulations, section 7.2-C9.
So moved.
Second,
Second,
okay, all in favor, but any further discussion? Okay, all in favor by roll call. Please say aye. Michelle Gillespie,
aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Millie,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
and Carrie, I'm an aye as well. So the waiver is granted to show all trees over 10 inches in diameter. Motion to, oh, Brian, is the 21st a doable day for you as well?
Yep, we'll make it work.
Okay, so is there a motion to continue the hearing for 400 Cedar Hill to July 21st at 6 p.m.?
I make a motion to continue the Cedar Hill 400 hearing to July 21st at 6 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, roll call. Michelle,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Millie,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Carrie is an aye as well.
And then
Okay.
Carrie, just as far as the
Oh,
documentation that
yes.
you'd like.
Yes. It sounds like so far we're just looking for any sort of the documentation you spoke of regarding, I guess the more the better, it sounds like, for any of the seminars or just any backup to the schedule that just really shows the primary use as educational. Was there any other documentation that we anticipate requiring? Nope. Okay. It sounds like that is it. And then let's see, if there is anything else, you mentioned you want to bring your counsel next time as well, so that will be fine. And if anything we need there specific or nothing? Okay. Okay. Great. So we will continue to July 21st at 6 p.m. Thank you. Okay. Oops. So Brian, you're still sharing your screen. There you go. Okay. So I'm going to change your role back to an attendee, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Moving on. Agenda. We are moving to discussion with town council regarding Newton Street and consideration of scenic road permit requirements for 280 Newton Street. So that is you, David. I will give you the floor.
Thank you. I had sent to Kathy earlier today, and I believe she has forwarded to the members essentially a summary of this situation. And for the record, I'll state it briefly, that being that in June of 2016, there was a permit issued under the scenic road bylaw with respect to rebuilding a stone wall on the 280 Newton Street property in connection with development of 4 single-family dwelling driveways. It's Seventh Group LLC, who is the permit holder. That permit had certain conditions, including the completion of improvements that were shown on a plan from 2014 that had been created in connection with an A&R application for property on the other side of Newton Street with respect to more construction. As I understand it, and as the summary explained, at the time of the permit approval, there was particularly a discussion between the applicant and a representative of Moore Construction, the owner of the property on the other side of the street, regarding cost sharing for the roadway improvements. It was represented to the board that there was an agreement, and then the board did impose the conditions, including that the work be done and that there be an as-built plan submitted to the town engineer. And the work is to be done to the satisfaction of the town engineer. As an aside, there was paving work that was done to the street at the end of last summer. There remains, which I think is the main issue here in terms of physical work, a guardrail which was to be constructed. And it's also the case that the applicant's council, Seventh Group's council, understands that there's a requirement for an easement on any areas of roadway improvement that might encroach on the property. I did not see a reference to an easement in the permit decision. It may be that that's shown on the plan, and Mr. Litchfield may be able to answer that for us tonight. The short, as it was presented to me, is that the 280 Newton Street owner is suggesting we either cannot or will not, I'm not sure precisely how that would be phrased, provide a guardrail, but we'd be willing to grant an easement for access in the event of any encroachment. This does seem that, based on what I've heard and what I've seen, that two developers had some kind of understanding. Somehow that went a bit sour and they're not able to coordinate both with respect to physical activity and the payment of money. And that's why it appears that there's an impasse at present. So the question, essentially, what seventh group is asking is, would you be satisfied if we provide an easement and not the guardrail? And I think here at this point, it might be appropriate to hear from Mr. Litchfield on that question of where this easement requirement seems to be coming from.
Thanks, David. The easement, as I look at the plan, there was an easement along Mr. Ramadan's side of the property for roadway widening in the future. There was no requirement for an easement on the Gustafson, which is the developer's, Mr. Walmbolt's side of the road, if you will, for that portion. So there was no easement that was necessary for that. There is a requirement for 462 linear feet of guide rail, and some of it is on both sides of the street. Not sure if that answers your question, or if you need more clarification.
That, I think, addresses the easement. It may be the case that the fact that we had two property owners sort of participating in an application of one of the owners because of the obvious interconnectedness, them being on opposite sides of the same street, that the easement reference wasn't picked up in the way that the property owners understood. The conditions that are included in the permit decision are relative to a certificate of occupancy. And the seventh group's counsel seems to be asserting that that owner is unable to get permits to do work. Now, I would anticipate that an owner who's concerned about the condition of occupancy may not want to proceed with a building permit, but the wording of the condition relates to occupancy certificate and not to a building permit. So I don't know whether there's any further information on that point. I do understand that the permit holder's engineer has made periodic inquiries to various departments in the town about trying to get a relaxation of these conditions. I don't know if there's any further information on the dichotomy of building permit versus occupancy certificate that anyone is able to offer.
Gary, if you want, I'd like to weigh in a little bit on that building permit versus occupancy permit question that David poses. I'm not sure how many of the board members remember the very precarious position we were put in with Mr. Ramadan back before the improvements were, the plans were completed. He had a house that was not to be occupied until the plans were complete. Somehow a resident was able to move in there and persuade the school system to let their child go to school in Northborough because they were pending occupancy permit was in the works. It dragged on for many months, and we were constantly harassed by this individual looking for her occupancy permit, which one of the previous building inspectors was willing to hold back in accordance with the original permit that Mr. Ramadan had from a previous permit many years before the 2014 permit was issued. I think it goes back even 7 or 8 years before that. So although the permit says occupancy permits, I would be inclined to recommend the board not allow building permits until we know that there's an agreement that work is going to happen and that we have a much better situation than we have today.
Okay, is there a decision that you need from the board, David, or what do you need from the board tonight? Is this just informing us of the status or?
It was a status, Madam Chair, as well as the communication that I had with Seventh Group's counsel. They're essentially contesting the terms of the permit. I think it's late for that, and I believe I noted in my summary that they had an argument that because none of the individual openings for a driveway would exceed 15 feet, that the bylaw wouldn't apply. I don't think that's an appropriate reading of the bylaw. I think under one property owner, you would certainly have to take into account the cumulative number of feet of wall that would be disturbed. So in my view, the bylaw did apply, an application was made, a decision was rendered. I don't know if the property owner is going to try to pursue this in some more formal legal manner. I think the real question was whether there were any elements of the physical improvements that are part of the permit conditions that the board would be willing to modify or relax in some way. And obviously that's the board's discretion.
Are there, oh, Amy, go ahead.
I would just go on Fred's recommendation because this has been dragging on since 2008, and I don't know, it keeps coming back and forth, and I think anything we walk away from, then the town's in charge of putting in, right? I don't know, but I guess I would put my vote with whatever Fred decides because I think he knows the most of what's been going on back and forth, and so I wouldn't even know what to recommend. I think that would be more up to Fred and Kathy.
Oh, we can't hear you, Kathy.
As Fred and I both have, spoken with Mr. Dineski, they're sort of trying to be a little divide and conquer in that the developer's attorney, has been contacting me, and the developer's engineer has been contacting Fred. Bob's probably getting involved in the mix-up also, but of each trying to get from each one of us that they don't have to be responsible for everything that was outlined in the scenic road decision. And as we've explained to them, then that was the time, if they wanted to appeal a condition, that was at that point that they should have done that. The other developer has acted in good faith, has done all of the work that was required of him in order for him to move forward with his lots, which actually he hasn't moved forward with the lots. They haven't been developed yet, but I think that's actually, we don't know why he hasn't moved forward. But anyways, he is able to move forward, and he did carry out everything that was in his scenic road decision. But this particular applicant has not. So we would recommend, or at least I think I speak for Fred also, that we would recommend, that the board needs to stick with their decision, maintain their decision, that's what the applicant needs to follow through with.
Michelle, I'm curious to hear from you. I know you've been on the board through probably the whole time. Do you have any thoughts on this? Oh, I can't hear you.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I actually agree with Kathy. We've been going back and forth with, I'm not quite sure if I've seen the second applicant, but the first applicant for many years now. And I think we've worked hard on that decision. Some progress is made with it. And I actually agree with town staff that we should hold to the original decision and have them complete it as it was written.
Is this something that requires a vote or just general direction, or?
Madam Chair, I would take it that it's unless there are others with a different view, that it's the consensus of the board that there's no desire or need to make any modification to the permit conditions at this point. And it's going to be up to the permit holder to decide whether to make some kind of formal application for a modification or decide how else it wishes to proceed. I will communicate that there's not an inclination to change what was, as described, a thought out process for this particular development.
Yes, it does seem, Millie or Anthony, I didn't hear from either of you, but do you feel the same? Just so we can.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know this has been ongoing for many, many years, and I think the decision was made and it was agreed to, and I think it's within the right of the town to stick to this decision, and that's all.
Okay, and Millie?
Yep, I concur with that.
Okay, so there is a consensus of the board to stick with the original.
I don't think I would require anything further. I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention since both I and staff have been getting the communications from the interested parties, and now we have sort of, although they've gotten the same answer, we can give them a little more official answer.
Okay, and it sounds like if they wish, they can submit in some sort of application otherwise, or that what is next for them in this process?
Yes, they could conceivably submit an application to modify the conditions, and the board would have to go through the more formal meeting/hearing process and consider it. I don't know that there's any new evidence, but that would be up to the owner applicant to decide, and then for, if it's presented, for you to make a determination.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Anything else on that, or that satisfies what you need?
I think that covers the discussion. Thank you all.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so next we have on the agenda the continued public hearing to consider the proposed zoning amendments for 2020 annual town meeting. So.
Okay, so bear with me for a second, Carrie. I just got to get, well, actually, if you, however you want to proceed with this, I have a PowerPoint. It's an abbreviated PowerPoint because obviously some of these zoning articles are very lengthy. So it's not the full text of every article, but I made it more for if anyone at home was, wanting to follow along and didn't have the handout with them. So if you want me to do the, flip through the PowerPoint, that's fine. If you'd rather just have me go through the, handout that's been available.
I think the PowerPoint would be a nice format just because it's easier for people than to read the packet.
Okay.
Is it enough place where we could look at them one by one in case the board had any comments? And then I also obviously would take public comments.
Yes.
Maybe at the end we can do. Okay, so.
Yep. Let me just, let me get that. Oops, that's not it.
And you have the ability to share your screen.
Yeah.
Does it look
Kathy,
like you see that at
can
the
I ask-
bottom?
Do you need assistance, Kathy?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So click on the share screen button at the bottom, just the
Yeah.
big green button, and then you should see is your PowerPoint open right now?
No.
So open up.
So that, okay, that's not, hang on, folks. David, I know this will, I had it open, I thought on my desktop, but
Okay.
wait a minute, let's.
You'll want to, do you have access to the folder that it's in, that you saved it
Yeah,
in?
that's what I'm looking for right now. Um,
I can hop on your screen remotely if you need me to.
yeah, can you? Because
Yep.
I'm not.
Bear with me. I'm just loading that up right now.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, folks.
On your
I-
laptop, right?
I even practiced this afternoon and had it.
That's okay. It's a good time to get a snack.
Now, David, I'm thinking it should be the first thing. Oh, here it is.
Got it?
Okay, there it is, David.
All right. So let's see. So this is your, okay, so you're gonna go back to your Zoom meeting and you want to share, let's see, this one here,
Okay, yeah.
okay, and then share, and then you're gonna,
Hit F5 or?
yep, start your, hit F5 and go ahead and do your, there you go.
Okay. Okay, so are you all set, Carrie?
Yes.
Okay. So the first article, which again, I think probably after last night's selectmen's meeting, the warrant will now get printed, but the first zoning article is Article 38. And this particular article starts off with, this is the funeral home article, or that relates to changing the location in the zoning table where funeral homes can be located. So presently, it's basically the use table. There's no definition or anything that's changing. So currently today, funeral homes are allowed by a special permit in the residential C district, the general residential district. They're allowed by special permit there, and then they are not allowed in Main Street residential. So the proposed change that the board is putting forward is to now prohibit funeral homes in the RC district and the general residential district, and then allow them by a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals in the Main Street residential district. And so basically that's Article 38. Do you want me to go through each article, Kerry, and then
Well, I
do?
just wanted to stop and see if, are we describing any of our background, like reason for this, which we can do maybe if that's not part of your presentation, is it?
It wasn't part of my presentation. I was just going through, I had planned on, at least for tonight, I think at town meeting, we can provide more background, but I didn't have that prepared for tonight.
That's okay.
I was just,
That's okay. I just wanted to see if any board member has anything else to add that they want to say to this one here. And then, so I guess what I'll do is we'll have Kathy go through them. We'll see if board members have anything to add. And then at the end, we'll open it up for public comment if anybody has questions after hearing the full gamut of bylaw proposed amendments.
okay.
For me, I would just say this, I view this as a housekeeping issue for Article 38. That's all I would add there.
Okay, so Article 39 pertains to the definition of what a kennel is, and also the use table as far as where kennels would now be either prohibited or allowed. So the again, just very briefly, the definition that the board is proposing is pretty much the state's definition of what a kennel is. And then there was a little finessing by the planning board. And then as far as the location of a kennel, there's two different tables in our zoning. There's table 1, part A, which pertains to the residential districts, which this is the slide that's up now. So currently in the residential RA, which is the largest residential zoning district in Northborough. It's an 80,000 square foot zone. Presently, right now, it's allowed by a special permit, and the proposal is to change that to a no, or not allowed. And then in the Table 1, Part B, which pertains to the commercial and industrial districts, presently today, it's not allowed, a kennel is not allowed in the industrial district, and the proposed change is to allow it by right in the industrial district. So the three, in summary, the three changes that are happening is a much more definitive definition of what a kennel is. The use already exists in our zoning table, but the definition is being expanded to match the state's definition. And then the two tables are changing as to where this use is allowed or not allowed.
Does anybody have anything they want to add to this in terms of intent behind it or anything to point out?
No.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, Article 40 is actually what we just spent a good part of the evening on. This is about indoor commercial recreation. And presently, we're not looking at changing the definition, but what the board is proposing that right now in the commercial and industrial districts, the use is allowed by special permit, except for in the industrial district where it's a prohibited use. And the proposed change is that it would now be an allowed use in the industrial district. That's it for 40.
Oh, okay. Does anybody have anything to say about this one? I will, as you were talking, Kathy, I was thinking about the kennel one again, just refreshing my memory through all of this. And one thing I just want to point out is there are obviously a lot of people that have started dog walking businesses and maybe worried, oh no, now I can't walk dogs. I think the definition we came up was really about, having them on your site, on premise overnight, or having a yard full of dogs in a residential neighborhood. Not so much that you are going to take out dogs around the neighborhood for a walk if you're a dog walker. So I remember thinking that back when we talked about it, that wasn't really the intent, to prevent people from being dog walkers.
Right, and I believe, Amy, you can correct me, but I believe that dog walking on premise was specifically added into that
Yes.
definition.
Yeah, that was the only thing that was changed.
Yeah.
But it's not like around the neighborhood or anything.
You
Like
can go
Carrie
around
just
the
said.
neighborhood. Yeah, you can go wherever you want.
Yeah, you can go in the woods, you can go wherever you want.
You can't have 20 dogs sleep over and in a residential neighborhood was sort of the.
Right. Well, I guess people were getting creative. It wasn't considered a daycare or a kennel, it was a dog walker. But a kennel or even a daycare is just someone who has the dogs on their premises, no matter what they're doing, is what the way the state definition reads. Unless you're breeding them or they're your own dogs.
Right.
So I don't know. I just thought it was good to follow the state definition.
Okay. Oh, there was something extra. Oh, just a table of uses for this one.
Right, I forgot to flip to that. I had described it, but I forgot to flip to that slide. So again, basically showing that, indoor commercial recreation is presently allowed by special permit in all the business districts. But currently it's not allowed in the industrial district. And that's the change that you're proposing, is that it would be an allowed use in the industrial district.
Okay. Any additional thoughts on this? Any comments from the board? Okay. Nope.
Okay. Next article is Article 41, and Article 41 pertains to light manufacturing in the industrial zoning district in town. So there are a few changes that are being proposed. The first one is in the definition of light manufacturing. And because of the system that we use, it was a little difficult. The system that we use to add and delete at town meeting. So it's just written in italics about you're proposing to delete the semicolon on the sentence that ends with heat, vibration, or noise. So you're proposing to take out the semicolon and adding a period to end the sentence there, and then to start the new sentence with further, all operations are located entirely within an enclosed building. And that sentence currently exists in the zoning right now as far as operations are located entirely within. And so the change that's being proposed is to make it its own sentence and add at the beginning further, comma, all. And then as far as the use table that's being affected, presently right now, light manufacturing is an allowed use in the industrial district. And the planning board is proposing that it be changed to a special permit that would be issued by the planning board. And then we go into other uses that aren't necessarily, the definition isn't being changed, but in the table it's being changed. Warehouse right now is an allowed use in the industrial district, and the planning board is proposing that it be changed to a special permit by the planning board. Same thing with trucking, rail, or freight facility, and that be changed from an allowed use to a special permit by the planning board. And then the use of a contractor's yard, again, the definition is not being changed, but the use of a contractor's yard or lumber yard is presently allowed in the industrial district, and it's being proposed to become a special permit by the planning board. So that's Article 41.
Okay, any comments on this one? Okay, I do want to comment here because I think people may wonder why you would move something from a by right to a permit. And I think in this case, what we looked at and what the planning board discussed was there are certain areas of town where industrial abuts residential, but we don't necessarily have, of course we have buffers in between, but when you're looking at different types of industrial uses, there are probably certain industrial uses you don't want to abut really close to your residential neighborhood. And what we talked about is ideally we would have, like, I think other places have, what is it, Kathy, like M1, M2? Is it usually an M for some reason? I don't know why that's in my head.
Well, that might be through the building code, but in the
maybe the building. Okay.
Yeah, in the zoning bylaw, we just have one district, industrial district.
Right, but if we were to have tiers of it, so say if industrial abutted a residential neighborhood, you'd want the first band to be, maybe you'd really only want research, because that seems pretty benign to be close to a neighborhood. And then as you band out further from residential, maybe you'd be more open to different kinds of industrial businesses, depending on distance from residential neighborhoods. So that's something that we weren't comfortable. We needed I think we need some guidance and expertise there. Maybe even we talked about a possible consultant helping walk us through that process so that we can make an informed we can be informed about what the implications are when we make those kinds of bans. So this, I feel like, was a bit of an interim solution where in the meantime, while we have industrial and residential so close in certain areas, let's just make sure that we're putting in appropriate things next to the neighborhoods. And the other piece, there's another section of town too that's a little quirky. That is our industrial that also has the commercial overlay on it. So we talked about, in that area, this is specifically the Northborough Crossing area. That's industrial right now with is it a business commercial overlay, Kathy?
A major commercial overlay district.
So if we think about the vision of what we want that area of town to be, you know, do we want, it gives us flexibility in that, those areas like that, you know, to kind of control in the interim what goes into the industrial area, and if it's appropriate in that specific area. So I hope that's a helpful shedding light on why we would do something like that. Any other comments on that? Oh, Amy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to follow up on that just for people who might be confused by it too. It's just that it's not a special permit isn't denying it. It is just making sure it's an appropriate location. Like we have 3 levels. You have prohibited, special permit, and then by right. And if it's by right, there really isn't much, you know, you can do. But with special permit, it gives you a way to make sure it's appropriate for the area. It's kind of what you said, but I'm just following up.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts on this one? Okay.
Okay, then the next article is Article 42. And Article 42 pertains to home occupation, which again is an existing use in the North Row bylaw. And a couple different things being proposed here, which I tried to summarize here basically on this particular screen. But this is the gist of what is shown as underlined is new language that's being proposed. So the definition of home occupation is further being expanded to include that the home occupation shall be clearly incidental and secondary to the use of the dwelling as a residence. And then as far as presently in the zoning today, we have conditions that apply to the home occupation. And what's being proposed here is that right now it reads that that no more than 1 non-resident would be employed at the home occupation. This is increasing it to 2, so that 2 non-residents would be allowed to be employed. And then the second condition here presently allows that if somebody wanted to go over 25% of the use of their home for their home occupation, they could apply to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit. And this is being proposed to be deleted so that no special permit, people would no longer be able to apply for a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And then the last change for this particular section is being added to state that no more than 1 commercial motor vehicle may be parked in the driveway for the home occupation.
2.
Okay, any comments on this one? Millie?
That was no more than 2 commercial vehicles, right? I think she said 1.
I do have it written as 1. Let me. Oh, okay. Okay.
Originally we had 1, but then Michelle brought up,
Okay.
what about a commercial vehicle with a trailer? So we changed it to 2.
Okay, I'm glad you caught that. Thank you, Millie, because I do in the handout and the way that it was advertised in the newspaper, it reads correctly that it says 2 commercial motor vehicles.
Okay.
But in the draft of the warrant, and I will make that correction tomorrow, it reads 1 commercial vehicle. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Oh, in the printed warrant, it says 1?
Well, it's not printed yet, but
Oh.
I have a draft that I'm working off of from, this was pre-COVID when we started the warrant.
Wait, was there such a time pre-COVID? Like prehistoric.
Seems so long ago.
Oh, yeah.
Any other comments on this one? Thank you for pointing that out, Millie. Any
Yes,
other
thank you.
comments? Okay. All right.
Okay, and then the next article, Article 43, relates to, let me just get there, relates to the section of the bylaw that talks about duplexes. And in particular, this is obviously the section that we're referring to, which is 7-06030J. And when you get into that section, you get into number 5 of that section, specifically talks about 2-family dwelling units. And then from there, you look at the use table, and the use table has this particular footnote under minimum lot frontage and minimum lot width in the residential C district. That footnote only pertains to the residential C district. And the footnote today, what's being proposed is to delete this footnote, but the footnote today allows for an applicant to request a waiver to reduce the frontage and the width down to 100 feet, as opposed to in the table, it's 150 feet that's required. So again, it's residential C. An applicant should have 150 feet for frontage and width. The footnote today stands that somebody could apply for a waiver to reduce that frontage and lot width. And the proposed zoning article is to delete the footnote so that this table would basically just read 150 feet. And the footnote would be, deleted.
Okay, any comments on that? Okay,
All right, Article 44. As you probably all remember, we worked with a consultant from the regional planning agency, Central Mass Regional Planning Commission. And a few years ago, we proposed a zoning bylaw for solar. Unfortunately, it was not approved that year, really to circumstances beyond the planning board. And so the planning board is proposing to bring back a new and improved. This meets all of the current standards today for solar, for a solar farm. And this is all part of our Green Communities program that the town was recently, a couple of years ago, was awarded to become a green community. And as part of that is moving forward with a solar bylaw. So as you all know, this is pages of text, but in very short summary for tonight, we are essentially proposing to add a solar, I'm sorry, I had temporarily lost my place. We're proposing to add a definition for solar voltaic installation, and then, as with any new use, giving it a home. So in this particular instance, again, we're going to Table 1, Part A, which has to do with the residential districts. And what's being proposed is that roof-mounted and small scale ground-mounted installations would be allowed by right in the residential districts. And what would be prohibited are the large scale, and I'll go into that in a second because we've given those a home also. But this table also references the canopy mounted and large scale. So both of those are being proposed that they would not be allowed in the residential districts, as those are more appropriate for an industrial installation, a commercial and industrial installation. So if we go to the next table, again, we have the same 4 uses: the roof mounted, the canopy mounted, a small scale ground mounted, and large scale ground mounted. And in this particular instance, again, roof mounted would be allowed. That the canopy mounted in this particular case would be allowed in all of the business districts and the industrial district. We then get into the small scale ground mounted, which again are okay in the residential districts. we're proposing that all of those be allowed in the business districts and the industrial district. And then the large scale ground mounted installations, that those would, the board considered, along, with the assistance of the consultant, that those are not appropriate for the business districts, but that it's definitely an appropriate use for the, for the commercial districts, but it's definitely an appropriate use in the industrial districts of town. And then there are, assorted changes in the bylaw. There is again, definitions that are being added to what each one of these uses actually means.
Okay, would anybody like to say anything about this one? I will say that Bob had a lot of experience with solar in a previous life or job, and was really, in addition to working with the consultant, was really instrumental in helping to craft some of the details that you don't see here. But we thought a lot about things like safety and, not just location, but what do we need for signs or fences, or there are many, many hours that went into this that you're not seeing here, but I feel like a lot of work went into by the consultants, the board, the staff. So first of all, I really appreciate that. But secondly, Bob, do you have anything you want to add to the solar bylaw? Any comments?
Last time I reviewed it, it seemed pretty complete. It included all the stuff that I had recommended from my previous building inspector experience in Millbury. They had a variety of ground mount solar installations, clear cutting 20 or 30 acres for panels. They put one very, very close to a wetland, and they got around that. They had one of the installations had to deal with the railroad because it's a direct abutter. The railroad has first options on the land. So in Millbury, they really ran the gamut of installations. So I was able to bring some of that experience to the language here, and I think it's pretty complete.
So we have, just to touch on a couple of those, Carrie, the majority of the text has to do with the site plan approval process for the large scale ground mounted.
Mhm.
And so it talks about everything from security, an operations and maintenance plan, landscaping, dimensional requirements, design standards, environmental standards. So stormwater management plan. So I think as Bob just said, it's really a very full picture of what the town is able to review if and when a large scale ground mounted is proposed for the town. So that's, it's several pages that are being added to the zoning bylaw, and we'll have that. I mean, I presently have that as a handout. It's on the town's website, as all these zoning articles are. And we'll have that as a handout for town meeting, as visual presentations are going to be impossible, given that it's now proposed to be held in the football field at the high school.
Right.
So we won't have a screen, to be able to refer to.
Okay. Anything else, anybody? Okay.
Okay, and then the final article is Article 45, and this relates to, or what we're calling a hazardous materials bylaw. And in this particular, this is an addition to our zoning bylaw. And what we want to stress, particularly at town meeting, that this is not a bylaw that we are encouraging or trying to attract a hazardous materials facility or a solid waste facility. This is a situation where state law supersedes local zoning bylaws, where if a town doesn't have a home for this type of use, then it could, if they were approved by the state and DEP, they could essentially locate in any zoning district in Northborough. So this particular bylaw directs that type of use specifically to our industrial district. And again, it's not being proposed as an allowed use. It's being proposed as a special permit. And so the two definitions, again, this is not as lengthy as a solar bylaw, but it's a lengthy bylaw. We worked with, again, the planning board and staff worked with the Regional Planning Commission to come up with this particular bylaw. And it's not, again, it's not so much that this is a brand new bylaw, but we were able to, throughout the existing zoning, insert into specific sections, either a definition, the table of uses, and also, use our existing zoning as far as setbacks and landscaping and site plan review. So this table is, and this will be fixed for town meeting, of course, but just somehow in translating this, I'm off one column. So if you look at the uses, this is for the commercial districts and the industrial district. You go down to the last two uses that are underlined. So those are the definitions that we've added, and this is the placement of where they would be allowed or not allowed. And so hazardous waste facility and solid waste disposal facility, which again have very standard definitions from the state that we are proposing to adopt. These two particular uses would be prohibited in all of the commercial districts, and they would be allowed, again, this table is just, if you can just, visualize moving it over one column. In the industrial district, you are proposing that it would be allowed by a special permit for both the hazardous waste facility and the solid waste disposal facility. And then we, elsewhere in the bylaw, as shown in the handout, we made modifications to the environmental performance standards, which are existing in the bylaw, and also to the density and dimensional regulations.
Okay, any comments from the board or staff for that matter? No?
Nope.
Okay. This is obviously another one where, as Kathy mentioned, we worked with the consultants and had quite a long conversation specifically about those things, like making sure it was understood that it's not something we necessarily want, but need to have something in place for anyway. Okay, so we've gone through all of the articles. This is a public hearing. Does the board have any comments to make in general before I open up to public comments?
Actually, Carrie, can I just make, I just wanted to point out, or just to remind folks, that you did receive an email. I'm going to assume that person is in the queue to speak, but I just wanted to publicly reference that you did receive an email from resident Scott Rogers.
Yes, I have.
And okay, so
yep. Okay, anything else? Any other emails that came in, Kathy, or is this it?
No, that was the one email I did receive. I had a phone call from a gentleman who is working on a particular property in town, who is expressing some concerns about the use being changed to a special permit, and but I don't have a specific email from him, and I believe that he probably, at least I know he was on at the last meeting. I don't know. I don't have my participants up, so I don't know if he's on for tonight too.
Okay. Okay, so why don't, as Kathy mentioned, the board did receive some questions from Scott Rogers regarding some of the bylaws here. I think we may have answered some of these questions, and Scott, not to put you on the spot, but I do see you on the line. So I'm gonna switch you over here to allow to talk. If you have any follow-up questions to any, if you feel like there was something you wanted to ask, hold on here. Scott, if you can hear me, and if you just say your name and address, that'd be great.
Yes, thank you. So this is Scott Rogers at 26 Tomahawk Drive.
Okay. Do you have any additional questions regarding the zoning amendments?
Yeah, so what was great, I had sent some questions in by email, and thanks to the board and Amy in particular, taking the time to answer those in great detail. So thank you for that. And, as folks can see, the planning board did a lot of work this year in terms of amending existing bylaws and new ones, as well as doing all the master plan work. So I know you guys were doing double and triple duty on some of these things, and a lot of hard work. I have questions on just two follow-up questions on two of the articles.
Sure.
On Article 42 and the residential uses, I just a question on what is the new item 7, that is the last line.
Kathy, can we use your presentation as
Sure.
a visual? Do you mind? Article 42, the number 7. What is number 7? So no more
The
than two. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So just a question on that, and it may be that the details are in the context from which section 6 is lifted. So I just didn't see the whole thing. So a situation where, let's say a resident is operating their business out of their home, it's probably common for, and I know some landscaping folks or some home renovation folks, that a vehicle would, folks before their shift would meet in the driveway and that sort of thing. So I wasn't sure whether this was a complete exclusion or no motor vehicles, parked overnight, that sort of thing. It wasn't clear on timing or duration or under what conditions that kind of when folks are just meeting to get ready to work on their project, if this would be prohibited.
Yeah, so that's a good question. In terms of enforcement, Bob, if this is obviously the intent of the bylaw, in my view, is really to be, on for a long period of time, not necessarily meeting in the morning to then go to work. What does that look like from your perspective, from an enforcement perspective, Bob?
It wouldn't be meeting to gather everybody to go to work for the day. Excuse me. Generally, it's, overnight or during the day, parking for an extended amount of time. And one of the reasons why I believe we went to 2 is, you've got a pickup truck and a trailer, or a pickup truck, a trailer, and a small tractor, like a Bobcat or something. Which is it's trying to ease it a little bit. A lot of people already have this situation going on now, but typically registered vehicles is anything with a plate. So if it's a commercial in nature, when we discussed it, we agreed that 2 was going to be okay.
But do we need to put any parameters around? So we're just saying that parked on the property, is that something that's up to interpretation of the zoning enforcement officer to decide if you've been parked there all day versus if you stopped in for a short period of time? We don't necessarily have to put a time on that.
No, I think that's a little too much. It's every situation is potentially different. But the parking does have to be on a paved surface. So that's something I'd be looking at anyway. But it's one was a little bit too restrictive, given the fact that you've got a lot of people working out of the office. I mean, say for example, if you've got say a home inspector with a minivan, and you have somebody else like a home catering business, that's 2 commercial vehicles right there. And that would certainly, fit the home occupation guidelines. So it's not just contractors and landscapers and things like that.
Yep. Okay, thank you for clarifying. Amy, did you have something? I thought I saw you raise your hand.
Just a quick thing, and it kind of goes to what Scott said. When people are stopping by for the day in the morning to catch up and then leave, a lot of these zoning bylaws are more for, they have to be written out. So if there's a problem, like say that there may be 3 cars showing up and they're not staying for long, it's not that Bob can go out and drive around the neighborhoods but it's good to have in the bylaws. So say it's an offense that's happening every day and there are 20 cars, it's good to spell it out. But just because it says 2 doesn't mean that, Bob or anybody goes around driving around saying, I see 2 cars there. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It's not that we're trying to be overly restrictive, but you need guidelines and bylaws in place for when there are issues. I don't know if that makes sense.
One of the things, if I might add, is that, we're literally too busy to go around and police the neighborhood, and one of the things is when I get a complaint, the first thing I do is I go out and take a look at it. And if it's a legitimate complaint and it is a violation of the zoning bylaws, which I have to research out, then I have some sort of an enforcement tool to say, hey, listen, you've got too many vehicles on the property, or whatever the infraction is. Without that being in the zoning code, I basically have nothing to do about it, and I would generally turn it over to the police, and even they have limited powers in terms of what to do.
Does that answer your question, Scott?
Yeah, that's great to know that there's discretion then in terms of the enforcement and a level of reasonableness on that. That makes sense. Thanks for that. On Article 43, that removal of the footnote, the follow-up question to that is, trying to maintain those lot frontages and width, but does removing the footnote kind of remove the board's flexibility on granting a waiver if it makes sense in a particular case? Would that not give you all the discretion to do something when it makes sense?
Yeah, that's a good question. From my point of view, I think that sometimes a waiver can create a disconnect. So when we put in certain bylaws for specific frontage, if it's up to really the residents when they come to town meeting. If the residents want, a frontage that's lower, then that should be brought forward as the frontage that we use in our bylaw, not kind of tinker with waivers and how do we make that different outside of what I think maybe the residents would want to see. So certainly if there's any instance where 150, I think the frontage on that is 150, the waiver is bringing it down to 100. If residents truly wanted 100 instead, then that should be brought forward as the actual frontage, not necessarily through the waiver format. It's not like a special permit or a variance with clear criteria in my mind. And especially as we see these cases, it can be looser, or we try to evaluate things by looking at a criteria, and it's a little looser. The waiver criteria is a little looser. I think if you were on earlier, you saw us vote on a waiver earlier, and it's very loose. There's no real walking through a criteria type thing that I feel like would make us feel more confident in making those types of decisions. Does that help answer that question?
Yeah, thank you very much. And that's all the questions I had. So, once again, you did a great job in answering all the ones that I posed via email.
Okay, great. Thanks for paying attention. Okay, Henry, I see you have a question. Hold on, let me put you. Okay, Henry, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you unhear me?
We can, yep. If you could just state your name and address.
Henry Squilani, 72 Crestwood Drive, Northborough, Mass. One of the reasons that I think you took that paragraph out was 2 years ago, the town meeting voted in 150-foot frontage, and then builders were coming in trying to get a waiver to go under that 150 within 2 months after we voted in the 150-foot frontage.
Yes, is that a statement or a question?
That was my statement.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, it wasn't a question. It was just a feeling of why people were talking about that paragraph that gave the waivers when we just voted in to make it 150 feet. I think it was 2 town meetings ago, maybe it was 1. But, and then right after that, builders came in and were trying to get waivers to go to the less than 150 feet for duplexes.
Okay. Okay, great. That's great history. Thank you, Henry. Do you have
Okay,
any questions?
no, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. And I have another, I thought I saw another hand raised here. I apologize. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I have, looks like Carter Brannon. Carter, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, if you could just state your name and your address.
Okay. I'm Carter Brannon, 22 Sherland Drive. I just on I think it was Article 41. It seemed like there was a lot of things that were being changed, and was just kind of wondering about how it seemed like it was a lot to put up for one vote, and whether like I'm not entirely sure. Is it possible that like if the town at town meeting wanted to approve parts of it and not all of it, is that something that's possible?
So let's see. Kathy, this is 41.
Sure, I can answer that, Carrie, if you want.
Sure.
On on this particular article, the reason why they were why the various sections were put together is because they do act as one. So
Okay.
it does seem you know, there's one table being affected, and there's one definition being affected, and multiple things, you know, multiple items in that table are being touched. But the definition in particular that's being changed, light manufacturing, you know, does go hand in hand with the light manufacturing use. I mean, you know, they're meant to go together as a package, but I suppose somebody could separate them, you know, make a motion to separate them out so that they were only voting on each use. If somebody, you know, saw fit that they, you know, thought one use should be still to be remain, you know, as an allowed use, and another use, you know, should be a special permit. I mean, there is a way to break it out, but it would have to be done on the floor of town meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, does that answer your question, Carter?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments or questions? I'm just trying to, okay, nope. All right, I don't see any other hands. Okay, so in going back to approving these, we need an official vote for each one for town meeting. Should we start? We'll just go in order. Do we have to read the entire motion, Kathy, for the record, or?
No, I think if everyone, if you just wanted to go, you know, just say article by article, you know, you don't have to read it, Carrie. I mean, if somebody does want clarification, I mean, certainly I can provide it. But if again, I don't know if people have the, you know, if the board members have the handout.
Mhm.
And so you could really just, you know, vote, you know, starting with article, which is the first article,
38.
Article 38.
Okay, but then read the, how much do we have to actually repeat for the motion to be valid?
Well, yeah, I mean, your motion could be just that the board proposes to, you know, recommend Article 38.
As presented?
Yes, yeah. Or, you know, as written in the handout, dated June 9th, 2020.
Okay, clarification on home occupation. Does the handout have 1 or 2 cars?
The handout has 2,
Okay.
has the correct number.
Okay, so as written in the handout presented on, when was it?
Dated June 9th, 2020.
Okay.
So if you,
Go ahead.
I don't know if it's helpful if you want me to go through, I can just put up each one.
Sure, that'd be great.
So that's
Thank you for
38.
creating this presentation, by the way. It made this much smoother. Okay, is there a motion to recommend Article 38 to the annual town meeting 2020 warrant as written in the handout from June 9th, 2020?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
Okay. I'm sorry, who did the second on that? Was that you, Millie?
Michelle.
Oh, Michelle. Okay, just for the minutes, I couldn't see. Okay, I'm gonna do roll call then. There's a motion, seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call. Millie,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
and Carrie is an aye. Okay, moving on to Article 39. Okay, is there a motion to recommend Article 39 to the annual town meeting warrant 20? I'm mixing up all these words, I'm sorry. Am I using the correct language, Kathy? A recommend to the town warrant? Okay.
Yep.
Is there a motion to recommend Article 39 to the annual town meeting 2020 warrant as written in the handout dated June 9th, 2020?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
That was a second from Millie Milton. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call. Millie,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
and Carrie's an aye. Motion passes. Okay, Article 40. Is there a motion to recommend Article 40 to the annual town meeting 2020 warrant as written in the handout dated June 9th, 2020?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Millie beat you to it. I'm gonna give Millie the second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, roll call. Millie,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
and Carrie's an aye. Motion carries. Article 41. Okay, is there a motion to recommend Article 41 to the annual town meeting 2020 warrant as written in the handout from June 9th, 2020?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Oh, and Anthony got you back. All right, Anthony's the second on that one. All in favor? I'm sorry, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, roll call. Millie,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
and Carrie is an aye. Motion carries. Article 42. Okay, motion to recommend Article 42 to the annual town meeting 2020 warrant as written in the handout from June 9th, 2020.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Roll call. Millie,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
and Carrie's an aye. Motion carries. Article 43. Is there a motion to recommend Article 43 to the annual town meeting 2020 warrant as written in the handout on June 9th, 2020?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Was that you, Michelle, on the second?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, Roll call, Millie Milton, all in favor, Millie Milton,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
and carries an aye. Motion carries. Okay, Article 44, is there a motion to recommend Article 44 to the annual town meeting 2020 warrant as written in the handout from June 9th, 2020?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Millie, was that you on the second?
Michelle.
Michelle on the second, okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, roll call, Millie,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
and carries an aye. Motion carries. Okay, Article 45. Is there a motion to recommend Article 45 to the annual town meeting 2020 warrant as written in the handout dated June 9th, 2020?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, Anthony has a second. Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, we'll do a roll call. Millie,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
and carries an aye. Motion carries.
Carrie, I just wanted to ask if anyone wanted to change as far as who's doing presentations and making the motions and presentations. So I know there was some question last week that, if the meeting was to be held inside, some people, weren't comfortable attending. But now that it's outside, if you want to change any of that, I just need to get that recorded for the town moderator.
Yes, I think so. Do we want to, well, first of all, the meeting, if I think everybody knows now that it's outdoors, they're still working out some final details. Is there anybody on the board that does not plan to attend based on that? Or I guess you don't have to necessarily commit now, but if you think you may not attend, then just don't offer to present or make the motion, I suppose. Why don't we start? Should we go backwards, or is that harder to go backwards?
It doesn't matter to me, but
All right. Well, how about we start at the beginning? For some reason, I have it wrapped in my head one way. So if I go backwards, it's like doing the alphabet backwards. So why don't we start with funeral homes? So we need a person to present, first read the motion, and then make the presentation. Now, Kathy, one thing we talked about was making sure that we had really short presentations. So is this PowerPoint even appropriate to use if we've added a little bit of intent, or what's the right amount we need?
well, we won't be able to show the PowerPoint.
Oh, right.
So, but I mean, if you, what I did last year, I mean, and we can work on these drafts. I can prepare people's presentations, keeping them maybe more to bullets, and then hand them out to all of you. And if that's not what you're looking for, we can revise and amend. But I'm certainly willing to do that for you if to make your to write up your presentation for you.
And would everybody at town meeting receive a copy of that?
Not of your presentation, but what everybody would receive a copy, unless you wanted to. But I mean, normally what we would do is the handout that has been distributed and posted, that would just be modified, because right now it reads as to interested people come to participate in the public hearing. So it would be just changed. It would just have a different cover sheet to say these are the articles that the planning board are presenting. The planning board voted on every article. All 5 members are in favor. I would just do a little summary that way of when the hearings were held, what the planning board voted, and then the handout would just be this is Article 38, and it would be written out. But if you wanted to put your presentations as part of that, I mean, we could do that. I just, need to have that done well in advance so that we can get it printed.
Okay. Any thoughts from the board on that?
I have a comment about that. So typically at town meeting, even though they have the warrant articles right before them, often the audience will look towards the presentation, which is often additional verbiage up on the screen that won't be available. So I do think if it's bullets or footnotes, it's to print it out alongside of this, would be useful to the audience.
So is that something maybe I don't want you to have to do, carry the full weight of this. Is it
Oh no, it's not a problem to do it, Carrie. I we just don't. I don't want to be doing it, July 9th. So even though I tend to work well under pressure, I'll have this prepared, for everybody what their presentations would be. Say the at the very beginning of July. And then, people can just take a couple days to look at them, see if, whatever changes you want to make. And then, we'll finalize it like a week in advance.
Okay.
So that I can get it to the printer.
Okay. All right. So in terms of presentations, maybe the best way to start, is there anyone who wants to specifically present something so we can get that out of the way? Is there anything that you would like to present?
I'm happy with presenting the solar bylaw.
Okay, so that's Article 44.
Madam Chair, would it make sense just to speed things along for kind of to clump in, 3 or 4 bylaws to be read by one person and then do kind of a round robin just to keep it fluid and instead of like changing somebody out every time?
Oh, that's a great idea. Okay. So Michelle, do you want to do hazardous waste as well? The biggest of the bunch? Could the same person also do the motions? Is there any reason why 2 different people do the?
No, it could be the same person.
Okay, so maybe that's a good thought then. So do we want to, is there anybody who does not want to present, period? No, okay. So let's see. Michelle, you don't necessarily have to do those both. Those are big ones. But if you are going to, actually, maybe you should, because those will be the last 2, and then you'll be grouped into that. Do you mind doing that, even though they're the big ones?
What do you want me to do?
The hazardous, solar and hazardous? Hazardous?
I'll do those 2. Yep, I can talk to those 2. Yep.
Okay, let's see. If we go back, so I can't see, if we just go back here on I wouldn't mind actually doing the industrial. Okay.
I don't think I would mind doing funeral or kennel or.
Are funeral and kennels the first 2?
Yeah.
Okay, so Millie, funeral and kennel.
All right, you want me to do the indoor commercial and then the home occupation?
Are those the next 2?
Well, I don't know. I don't have the order.
Indoor and then
Okay, so
and then
Article
the industrials in the middle, I think.
Yeah, industrials in the middle.
So Article 40 is the outdoor. Is the is the recreational.
So maybe Kerry, maybe you want to do the recreational and the industrial.
Well, I don't have to do 2. It's okay.
Well, it's just for flow, and then I'll do home occupation, and Anthony can do duplexes.
What is 42?
42 is the home occupation.
Okay, so that's Amy. And what's 43?
43 is the duplex.
Anthony, do you want to do that or no?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And 41 is industrial?
Yeah, 41 is the changes to the industrial.
Okay, and 40 is
The,
recreation?
the recreational facility and industrial.
Okay, so then what I have here is Millie's will do 38 and 39. That's funeral and kennels.
Mhm.
I will do 40 and 41. That's recreation and industrial. Amy will do 42. That's home occupation. Anthony will do 43. That's the waiver. Michelle will do 44 and 45. That's solar and hazardous.
Good.
Okay, and then if you want to just close out the hearing, okay?
Thank
That's-
you.
yeah.
Okay, that's all you need for
Yes.
legal purposes, Kathy? Okay.
Yes, yep,
All right,
thank
is
you.
there a motion to close the hearing for the proposed, is there a motion to close the hearing to consider the proposed zoning amendments for the 2020 annual town meeting?
So moved.
Okay, second.
Second.
Millie seconded.
Yep.
Right, all in favor, roll call. Millie,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
and Carrie is an aye. The hearing is closed. Thank you for everybody's participation and lengthy involvement in these bylaws. Okay, let's see. Next, we have the public hearing for 222 West Main Street Common Driveway. And I have a public hearing notice to read. Let me make sure I read the right one. Okay. The public hearing notice states, in accordance with section 7-10-020 of the zoning bylaw and section 10-36-130 of the subdivision rules and regulations, the Northborough Planning Board will hold a public hearing on June 16, 2020 at 6 p.m. to consider the common driveway special permit application of Abu Construction Incorporated to construct a common driveway serving two lots, Lot 1A and Lot 2A, on the property located at 222 West Main Street, map 75, parcel 170. Plans were prepared by Cornerstone Engineering and are on file at the town clerk's office and town planner's office and may be viewed on the planning department webpage. Additionally listed here is the information that I read at the beginning of the meeting regarding the governor's March 12, 2020 order suspending provisions of the open meeting law, and also giving instructions on how to participate in the public hearing via several different options, including Zoom and also calling in by phone. Just a reminder to anyone calling in by phone that you must dial *9 to raise your hand and be recognized. Okay, with that, I need to bring in the attendees for this hearing. Let me sort my list. Okay, and I have Mike Sullivan. I don't see a Vito Colonna. Doesn't look like it.
Vito, I just added Vito. Sometimes he'll do the presentation, sometimes Mike, but I think it's Mike on this one.
Okay. All right. Tony Abu, I don't see. And Kathy Abu, I don't see. If you are here, nope, everyone's here by name. So I don't think that they are here. So I am going to come back into the panelist mode and welcome Mike Sullivan. Can you hear us okay, Mike? We can't hear you, so let's unmute you.
Can you hear me now?
David, oh, yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, good. Are you ready for me or?
You're ready, yes. Do you need to share anything? Do you see the ability to share your screen or?
Kathy, do you have a plan to put up?
I do not.
Can you, let me see if I have it downloaded. I thought it was, okay. Could you let me see if I could share my screen with you?
Yes, you may share your screen. Do you see how to do that? At the bottom, is there a green share screen?
I'm on an iPad, so it's at the top. Let me see.
Oh, okay.
Let me see if I hope I downloaded it on this. I think.
All right, Mike, if you can't
Let me
find,
just try. Okay, there we go.
oh, okay,
Can you see it?
yes.
Good. All right. Everybody's familiar with the site. We're at the corner of Route 20. Again, Mike, for the record, Mike Sullivan, Cornerstone Engineering, representing Tony Abu. The project is a 5-lot project. 2 of the buildings are up, the one on the corner and the one on Lincoln Street. The one on Lincoln Street is sold. The one on the corner is on the market. There's another lot, a 3rd lot on Lincoln Street that they haven't constructed yet. And the 2 we're going to discuss tonight, the 2 on Route 20. They're 37 and 38,000 square foot lots. The purpose that we're here is for a special permit to get approval on the common driveway. Seemed very appropriate, realizing we're trying to minimize any disturbance on Route 20. And what I've used for presentation tonight is under section 1036-130. There are 7 standards that need to be evaluated prior to approving this. The first one is minimum width, which is 18 feet with a 24-foot easement. We're proposing 20 foot of pavement per the fire chief's request, and the easement's 32 feet wide. So we satisfy that. Maximum grade is 10%, and the first 50 feet can't be any more than 6%. What we're proposing is 6% for the first 50, and then transitioning to an 8% slope. The distance from a right-of-way, the minimum is 65 feet. The closest right-of-way to our common driveway is on Crestwood Drive, and that's 350 feet away. Center line radius is 60 feet, which is what we have proposed on the site plan. Minimum site distance is 200 feet. We have 1,000 feet looking to the west and 450 feet looking to the east. The easement for the driveway has to be 15 feet off the property line, which we have. And the final number 7 is the house numbers have to be located in a certain manner and would certainly satisfy that. For the drainage, we've evaluated the pre and post. And as you can see, let me see if I can draw on here. Let me see. Right in here is the drainage system. That'd be a series of Cultex. In Fred's letter, which we'll talk about later, we had to change the grades on that driveway, so everything was pitched to that catch basin that would discharge to the Cultex. That has been done so that there'll be no discharge onto Route 20. This system that has been designed will accommodate the 100-year storm for both rate and volume control. The sewer and water line, again, to minimize the impacts on Route 20 and the construction in Route 20, we're proposing the sewer and water to run through an easement out the back of the house, and that would connect into the mains on Lincoln Street. Curb cut, we needed approval from the state. That has been done. We've submitted to them and they have approved the curb cut. The fire chief, as I had mentioned, wanted a 20-foot wide driveway. We had revised our initial plans to accommodate that. And in January, he submitted a letter of approval as far as that goes. Fred, I had mentioned, sent a letter. I could either go through it or just indicate that we have no problem with anything in it. I've talked to Tony about the issues that would impact his construction process, and he has no objections to anything that is being proposed. So I'll defer to You, Madam Chairman, if you'd like me to go through them or just touch on some of the ones that we're going to have to revise the plans for, I'd be happy to approach it any way you want.
Sure. Do you want to talk through maybe the revisions, and then Fred can fill in any gaps that he thinks that we should know?
Certainly. Does everybody have the letter from Fred in front of them, just so I can reference numbers?
I do not, but I.
Okay. The first one is what I had already mentioned, grade the driveway so it's all the sheet flow is directed towards the basin. We have done that and we'll be resubmitting that plan. The impervious cover calculation sheet, we took into account the existing impervious, which was minimal. We have to revise that sheet. Fred, we looked at that today. The system can still accommodate it, but we will have to revise that sheet 2A to reflect that revision. But the drainage will not have to be revised. Fred has recommended under number 5, he has recommended that dry wells be connected from the individual houses. I talked with Tony about that. He has no problem with it. The hood in the catch basin needs to be extended down further by 12 inches, and we have no problem with that as well. And the rest of it is pretty self-explanatory, that will not require any revisions. As-built plan, signature of the planning board, declarations of covenants, all that will certainly be done. So we would hope that that would be put in the conditions if the board decides this is an appropriate presentation. With that, Madam Chairman, I'll turn it back to the board.
Okay, Fred, do you have anything to add?
The only thing I wanted to talk about with Mike was the number 4. The plan says that the site distance is 450 feet, I think, going back towards the center of town, but it also says there's some grading in front of lot 1A. And I wanted to make sure it was clear that when the as-built plan is done, that 450 feet needs to be confirmed on the as-built plan. So
no problem.
We all agree that it's cut back appropriately.
No problem.
Okay. Everything else is pretty standard. The plan meets the regulations. Those comments that I had, I just think will make it a little bit better.
Okay, any comments from the board or questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Amy.
I just had a question for Fred. Did this go before groundwater?
No, it did not.
Okay. Was this one that was supposed to go through groundwater? I just see because there were impervious calculations and everything.
No, they're allowed by right, provided that they don't exceed the 15% impervious cover.
Okay. And you checked all the calculations, I'm sure.
I did.
Yep. Okay, I guess one other question I had with number 10, where it says the applicant shall submit a final plan for signature by the planning board. Is that a different A&R? Is that what that's talking about?
Yes. In the regulations, it calls for when you grant a common driveway, when the A&R plan just creates the 2 lots, or in this case, it was 5 lots. But when you get a common driveway special permit, they need to show on those A&R lots where the actual easement is and how it's defined. And that plan also gets recorded. Sometimes they do the A&R and the easement plan in one, and sometimes they do it in various steps. And I believe this one, the A&R plan was already recorded, but now there'll be another plan showing the easement and then who has rights to what. That also calls for declaration of covenants so that the homeowners are clear as to who has responsibility for which maintenance on the driveway.
Okay, and that's something that you will write out, like who has the easement for what, or that's something you go over with the applicant to decide, or it's just on the plan you can tell and it will have to be
No, actually,
documented?
The plan is just going to show the easements. The easement plans don't have to come back to the planning board as long as they're not creating any new property lines. They can just be submitted to the Registry of Deeds as what I believe they call an 81X plan. Because it's not creating any new lots, they can just add an easement and then make sure that that easement is properly referenced in the deed to each lot. The declaration of covenants is something that the attorney for the applicant will prepare, and then we will review to make sure that it covers all the appropriate maintenance so that there's no confusion later on that the town might be responsible for plowing or repaving that driveway. It needs to be clear that all the expenses associated with the driveway are private and the responsibility of those two homeowners in lots 1A and 2A.
Okay, thanks. I guess I've seen a couple different A&Rs, so I just wanted to make sure these will probably be the finals. Okay, I guess those were my only questions.
Other questions?
Yeah, so I do, and this is somewhat directed towards Kathy, but given that this, as far as I'm aware, there's still pending litigation with this site, and I'm curious or I'm concerned about, granting any permits or special permits at this time, or could we get even town council's input should there be any impact on doing so at this time before that's settled?
The two really don't have anything to do with each other because this is just strictly a common driveway. And in our common driveway regulations, it's not required as to where the common driveway is going to. It could be going to commercial properties, could be going to residential properties, single family duplexes, could be going to an industrial property. So we allow common driveways for, without stating who's the ultimate end user of the common driveway. So the common driveway won't change whether this is the common portion of the driveway won't change whether this is two single family houses, two duplexes, one duplex, one single family. The individual driveways for the properties will change, but that's not anything that the board has jurisdiction over. So it's just the common portion. And it's very similar to what's the situation with 425 Whitney Street, where there is a pending appeal, but there is a part of the law which applies here too, that, those appeals are their own, sort of their own animal, and, go the path through the court system, and the board continues on with the, with applications that are before them. So it doesn't matter what, again, who is the end user, whether it's a single family, a duplex, some combination thereof. It's the common portion of the driveway that meets your regulations, and that's what's before you.
So what is I have a question about that bump out. So there's like the extra driveway to nowhere at the, do you see that, Mike? I know you can't see where my mouse
You
is.
mean at the end, right
Yeah.
in here? Well, let me see. Right here?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what the fire chief wants to turn around vehicles. So so it's kind of like a wide turnaround for emergency vehicles.
So if a duplex were put there, that obviously makes 4 lanes into this. Where does that bump out go?
Well, that bump out is not part of the common driveway. The common driveway ends at the property line.
But if the fire chief wanted a bump out like that, I guess I'm thinking if for some reason this does go to
Oh,
duplex,
I see what you're
where
saying.
does the bump out go?
Well, that's, again, what we have before you are 2 single family houses. We haven't got into that detail on the duplexes. Obviously, we're gonna have to satisfy the fire chief in terms of how we do that turnaround, and we'd have to work with him on that.
Okay, so then I'm not comfortable either. I mean, I guess I have some questions that I'm afraid to ask in a public setting based on pending litigation, so I don't feel comfortable asking without being advised by counsel on what I can ask or can't ask. So,
I
you
mean,
know,
the
I don't wanna-
the alternative is to do two singles. It just, from a planning standpoint, it made no sense to do the two singles. If the board doesn't want the common driveway, then we can do two singles by right. And I don't think that's a good idea. But if that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily, you know, giving a just, I'm
have
not
a
comfortable
question.
with the question. Yes.
I'm just curious, Mike, was Mass Highway suggesting you should do one driveway?
Oh, Mass Highway was, they definitely, they want to minimize the amount of curb cuts. And they were very much in favor of what's being proposed.
Would they
I mean, just
agree
from a
to
safety
drive-
standpoint, it makes no sense not to do it.
Right, but would they agree to two driveways, or are you saying they're not?
I don't
agreeing to
know. If we have no option, they're not going to say you can't build on the lot. If the planning board denies a common driveway, then we go back to two driveways and we'll deal with DOT.
Any other comments from the board? Or questions? Any comments from, we heard from Fred, any other comments?
Well, I would confirm what Mike said about Mass DOT. I did speak to the permits engineer and he was wholeheartedly in favor of one curb cut on these two lots, as far from that intersection as possible. So they did accommodate that. I'm not sure if in fact the applicant won his appeal and he was granted two duplexes, would he still have to come back for site plan approval on the duplexes? And then the board would have the ability to review the common driveway at that point.
See, I don't know, and I don't want to ask too many questions I'm not supposed to, so that's what makes me a little nervous about this. I'm going to ask if there are any comments from it is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this hearing? Just raise your hand. Okay, I didn't see anybody there. Let's see. So, I mean, how does the rest of the board feel about comfort level? Is this something that we would want to continue? Do we have a chance to just sort of get a real sense from a legal standpoint what our rights are, or what's I don't know. I guess we haven't heard much at all about pending litigation, so I hesitate to dig in deeper.
I've heard nothing, so I can't help you on that end.
No, I understand that.
I mean, from my perspective, it just seems, you know, I understand what you're saying, that there's litigation, and when there's litigation, people become concerned. What's before the board today is two single-family houses with a common driveway. I don't see how the two tie in together. There's specific requirements for the common driveway. I think we've satisfied those requirements, and I don't know that the litigation should negate what I look at as a whole separate issue.
So, Mike,
Yes.
so it's almost what Kathy just said, which was the common driveway is a common driveway with regardless of what is on the other side, whether it's two single families, commercial, industrial, whatever. I think what's in question here is the whole thing changes once all of a sudden you change the scale of the building, or the driveways going to the buildings, because of this additional bump out that the fire chief is requesting because of a turnaround radius. So just saying, if, for example, the one that's closest to the single families become two duplexes, that's going to be very hard for you to get driveways to that duplex without getting a bump out. It's so close to the property line, or at least what it's looking here. So that's why I think the board, if I'm wrong, it looks like they're questioning that.
Well, if I may, Michelle, under those circumstances, just looking at it, it looks like the turnaround would be towards Route 20. So instead of the bump out being parallel with Route 20, it would be perpendicular. So you'd have two driveways going in and then another, a third. Let me just draw on here. Kind of heading in this direction here. You'd have a bump.
Can you do that with that hill? I mean, that's a huge hill there.
Well, the hill doesn't start, the hill doesn't start till here. That's the start of the hill.
Okay.
That close to the
I'm a terrible
sidewalk?
drawer.
I don't think, that looks pretty close to this. That hill doesn't start till the sidewalk?
Yeah, if you look at, let me get my pen scratching off of here.
Carrie, if I could, while Mike's doing that, if the board wanted to, again, it's a special permit, so you place conditions if you so choose. And, one of your conditions could be that this is a common driveway for two single-family houses, as referenced, on this plan, lots 1A, lot 2A. And right in your decision, you state that it's for two single-family homes.
Right, I just don't want to make any decisions. Me personally, my opinion is I don't want to make conditions and decisions that then impact pending litigation that I should have known ahead of time, but didn't know because I haven't had the benefit of advisement of counsel. So I don't want to forgo that advisement, make up my own rules, and then find out that we've, done something wrong. That's my primary concern here. I don't know if anyone on the board, if I'm the only one, or it sounds like Anthony is a concern of yours. Any other concerns, or, I'm not the only vote, so I want to make sure that I'm not.
Hi, Carrie. I'd like to just chime in one more time. I believe that, and Bob might be able to speak to it a little bit more, that the fire department has to sign off before the building permits can be issued. And if the lots were to change to duplexes, they would still be required to have that turnaround sufficient for the fire department to get in and out. And I believe the building permits wouldn't be issued without the fire department signing off, but perhaps Bob could weigh in a little more. He works with that process more than I.
Just a question, the square footage, the current proposed houses, what's the square footage is?
Well, the box is what? 65 by 48. So 70, with the garage. So they're, they'll probably be 3,000 square foot single family houses.
Okay.
Just for clarification, Carrie, that line that I drew is the top of the slope. And actually the slope that you see driving by on 20, that's essentially entirely off property. That's within the right of way, the street right of way. It's a little misleading when you go by there. So there is room, and it's perfectly flat up in this area here.
Okay. Okay, any other comments from the board? Is this something, Millie, you're comfortable going forward without advisement? Oh, Millie, I can't hear you. You're on mute. Oh, you're still on mute, Millie.
Is that better? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I guess this sort of existed before I came on, so I'm not quite sure some of the situations that are related to it. But based on kind of what Kathy is saying, and that at wherever the common driveway is going, it's right now doing it as proposed with two single family houses, and maybe make that as a condition.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Amy, any concerns from you?
I could go either way. I could go with the special condition too, with the condition added, but also I understand that we've never met with town council to discuss litigation, and we have nothing on our July meeting. Maybe that's something we should do. And
Well,
since
Oh, go ahead, Amy. I was,
Oh, and since these houses, we're not sure if they're going to be duplexes or single family, is it that big of a deal to bump this just to the next meeting till after, Kerry gets to ask her questions to town council?
Well, I think we'd have to go to executive session anyway.
Yeah, can you do that on video?
the reason why you haven't met with town council yet, because I mean, I'm speaking with town council at least once a week. But on this particular subject matter is that there isn't anything to discuss. Nothing has happened since the applicant filed the appeal. The only thing that
Sounds like Kerry might have a couple questions. Even if there isn't anything to discuss about the case, maybe members have questions about the case, because we've never been down this path before, the right or the wrong way to do things.
What, Michelle, do you have any thoughts either way? Oh, you're on mute, Michelle.
No, I'm okay.
Okay. Anthony, anything else to add?
So I think since we're like 3 weeks away from our next meeting, my preference would be to, get feedback from town council, make sure if there's anything that we're not considering that we should know about, and then we could put this on the next agenda and go from there. Would be my preference.
Is that okay with the rest of the board?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mike, it doesn't sound like you're breaking ground anytime soon, if you're still thinking about what this will be.
Correct.
I didn't hear, it's hard for me to say everybody at once. It looks like that was okay with the board to continue. So if this is something we would have to have an executive session to meet, which I guess we can do outside of this hearing to vote for. But what we need now is to vote to continue this.
Terry, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is there any issue? Let's presume that town council says everything's fine. You don't need to marry the two issues. Is there anything else you need from me from a technical standpoint that you're uncomfortable with? Or is it just that legal issue?
I think just legally, I just want to make sure I can ask all the questions I want to ask without it, or just impact or any sort of.
I got it. No, I just, for the next meeting, I'm just trying to figure out who needs to be present at the meeting. And if it's just a legal issue, that isn't me.
Okay.
so Carrie, before you vote to continue the hearing, can we just talk about what the questions are that you want me to forward to town council?
Well, I think we need to go in executive session because I want to speak specific to the litigation, pending litigation.
I won't tell anybody. That's fine. I'll, just let us know what you need us to do.
Okay, so do we need to vote to have an executive session for the purpose of discussing pending litigation, or do we do that? Should we do that outside of the hearing?
No, it doesn't really matter either way. I mean, I think that's, is that's the sense of the board, is that you'd like to have an executive session at your July 7th meeting, but Michelle won't be there. And this is a special permit vote. So I'm going to assume that the applicant would probably want all 5 members present. So you might want to think about having an executive session as part of your July 21st agenda, and maybe do the executive session first, possibly even, at 5:30, and then your meeting would start at 6 and you would continue this hearing until, July 21st.
Does that accurately reflect the board's wishes? So
Michelle,
Michelle,
am I on mute?
oh, go ahead. Yep.
Am I? Oh, I'm not on mute. I was just wondering because we have such a full plate on the 21st now. Like, do you think we should? We have nothing on the 7th, I don't think. Should we just do a quick one on the 14th? Like,
No.
would people
We
rather have
can't,
a
we have to
huge?
do our Zoom. We only have our Zoom.
Right,
Oh, okay.
right, we only
I
have
didn't know
one,
that.
we only have one Zoom license. And on the 21st, you just have two applicants. You have a continued hearing for 0 Bartlett, which you're doing your site visit tomorrow on that.
Yep.
And then the soccer.
Oh, okay. I just didn't know if it was piling up. I just keep hearing the 21st. Okay, I'm fine with that. The 21st.
Okay, so why don't we, is there a motion to continue the hearing for the common driveway, 222 West Main Street Common Driveway Special Permit to July 21st at 6 p.m.?
I make a motion to continue the special hearing for 222 West Main Street Common Driveway to July 21st at 6 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, roll call. Michelle? Michelle?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Millie?
Aye.
And carries an aye. So we will continue that. Thanks, Mike. In the meantime,
Thank you, Carrie. One more thing. So just so I understand the process. So on the 7th, you're going to get together just to determine what the questions are. And then subsequent to that, you'll then talk to town council?
no, we're gonna, oh shoot, because Mike's not gonna have enough time in between. So if we have executive session on the 21st, right before the hearing, there's no in-between time for any response.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So the 21st you're talking about,
Right?
and those are just for the questions for town council?
Yes.
But
So
I
then
think,
you're gonna talk to town council, and then would be the subsequent meeting after the 21st in August?
Does it, that might have to,
I mean, I think a couple of things. I'm going to have to give some indication to town council what you want him to come prepared for, if you're going to do an executive session on the 21st. So what I'm hearing is that, obviously the questions center around, can you move forward with this common driveway application given the pending the pending appeal?
yes.
So, okay. So, and then from there, his response or his information to you, might be enough that you can move forward on the 21st.
Okay.
And then if not, then I would suggest from the 21st, then
Continue.
continue it to your first August meeting.
Okay, so how about that, Mike? So that way you don't have to wait longer.
Well, the sooner the better.
Yeah. Okay, so, and then that'll just at least give the option, so we don't have to miss it.
So we'll do executive session at 5:30.
Yes.
Okay.
And do we have to vote on that?
Nope, that's okay. That's, I'll just move forward with, telling, I mean, I first have to go through the town administrator, but that why we want to have the executive session.
Okay, and then so we just made a motion that passed to continue to July 21st.
Okay, very good. Kathy, if you need anything from me, just let me know.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Good night.
Thank you.
Aye.
Are you guys, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
All right,
Yes.
sorry about that. Okay, let's see. Next we have continued public hearing for 425 Whitney Street, special permit site plan approval and special permit for groundwater protection overlay district. I have a public hearing notice to read. I think I do. Yes. In accordance with section 7-03-050.A2 and 7-07-010 of the Northborough zoning bylaws and the Northborough Planning Board will hold a continued public hearing on June 16, 2020 at 6 p.m. to consider the special permit site plan approval application and special permit per groundwater protection overlay district of Starus AST for the proposed construction of 2 additions to an existing industrial building located at 425 Whitney Street, map 15, parcel 8. The additions will contain approximately 20,100 square feet and approximately 3,375 square feet respectively. Plans prepared by VHB are on file at the town clerk's office and town planner's office and may be viewed on the planning department webpage. Again, I read the order earlier, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and indicated how the public could participate via Zoom or via telephone. And there's a reminder, if you're calling via telephone, please press *9 to raise your hand. So I need to allow the right participants in. And we have Stephen Madeus. Oops. Oh, you know what? I'm not co-host anymore because I think I called back in. David, are you still on the line?
Yeah,
I am. Hold on, I'll make you co-host.
Double, triple check, but I think yes.
Or if you, for some reason, that's up, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to promote Stephen, and I think I have Rich here, Rich Whitehouse, and let's see. I have Mike Corelli here, and let's see, Mark Thomas I see, and I don't see a Luke or a Jerry or a David. Keith, I don't see. Did I miss one? Ken, I don't see. Okay, if you're on this team and I didn't promote you to panelist, just raise your hand. Okay, it looks like we have everybody. Okay, great. So welcome everybody. It's been a long time. Hi, Stephen. I think, are you doing the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great. So we'll get started.
Okay, thank you. So Stephen Madeus and Mark O'Connell here on behalf of Starus AST. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yeah.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to thank the board for meeting remotely in these troubling times, but we appreciate that you're keeping business moving forward. So with me, if you recall, there was a meeting on March 10th that I didn't make, and then the whole world unraveled. But at the meeting was our project team of Mike Corelli. He's here tonight. He's the plant manager for Starus. Keith Burnett, facilities engineer, and Jerry Jerzinski. He's director of engineering and facilities for Starus AST. Also is Rich Whitehouse of VHB is with us virtually. So we submitted a second response memo to a series of questions. If the planning board will recall, there was a first set of questions in January, and we responded to that in March. And our response in March included a transportation impact assessment from a traffic engineer, a copy of the order of conditions issued by the Conservation Commission, the stormwater management report prepared by VHB, a photometric plan. Also, I should note that the Groundwater Advisory Committee issued a letter dated March 10th, reporting that it unanimously voted to recommend approval with conditions of the stormwater management special permit. So our most recent memo was in response to approximately 44 questions from the planning board, predominantly about the technology that would be used inside the building. I don't know if each member of the board had an opportunity to read my memo that is dated March 27th. I'm sorry, May 27th. It's in response to the March 11th memo from the planning board. But with COVID, I've been working remotely now for 3 months, but Steris also, just so you're aware, we have been representing to the board about the important work they do for the medical industry. They've been sterilizing the nasal swabs. There are 2 manufacturers of nasal swabs in the world, that facility in Maine that you may have seen in the news recently, and one in Italy. But all those main products get sterilized in Northborough. So like the swabs for the state of Rhode Island were sterilized in Northborough. They're also ready to sterilize syringes for a vaccine, hopefully. And also they are currently sterilizing equipment for pharmaceuticals as they do testing and development of hopefully a vaccine. So they've been very busy on all of that. They can speak to those topics if you want to know what's been keeping them busy in this crisis. But in my memo, I did mention to the planning board that there's a state law that governs the technology that will be installed and operated by Steris at this site. And I provided, I don't know if town council has an opportunity. I know he's no longer on the attending the meeting, but the notion of preemption, that when the Commonwealth through the general law occupies an area, and in this instance, they name the Department of Public Health as having the exclusive authority, that preempts the municipality from adopting or regulating that area that's occupied by the Commonwealth in that state office. But nonetheless, so I wanted the board to be aware of that. And the Steris team works hand in hand with the Mass Department of Public Health and its Office of Radiation Safety. So knowing that, I thought a lot of the questions are areas that the Commonwealth covers, but nonetheless, as we've been trying to be transparent throughout this whole lengthy process, we provided answers to each of the questions. So
Okay.
Whatever the pleasure of the board is, if you wanted to go over those responses, we're available to do that.
Okay, so it looks like in that case where it was a matter of that type of regulation, it looks like you just indicated that here so that we could easily see which pieces were actually dependent on that type of regulation.
Well, I mean, you have your jurisdiction over site plan, right? So now we're inside the building talking about technology.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, and to clarify, like how you've, I'm just looking at the response.
So I'm town council for, a number of towns. So I'm rather familiar with when the Commonwealth preempts an area from local jurisdiction. So I've never seen one as clear as this statement, but in the general law, such rules and regulations shall apply exclusively throughout the Commonwealth.
Yeah, no, I'm just clarifying how you've mapped out this response. I'm just looking at the different responses.
Yeah, it might be what the planning board probably feels they're at a disadvantage when they try to figure this out. Well, there's a reason why. There's a state agency that does it, that has the expertise, probably the resources. So, but nonetheless, we did provide answers.
Thank you. Okay, so is there anything you wanted to point out from this response specific while you have the floor here, or is it just something you wanted us to look at? And I think in terms of next steps, Kathy, this was sort of the final piece to get to the next phase. So do we just need to see if the board is, this is where we are and this is, wrap this up and let's move on to the next phase? Is that the next step?
Yes, that's where I believe that you're at based on, again, though it was a while ago, based on the last meeting in March, it was to get the responses to your questions.
Yep.
We went over the request for qualifications,
Mm-hmm.
had the DPW director come in who does a lot of these requests for the town. And then, so everyone agreed to the language that was in the RFQ. So now it's just a matter of, adding this memorandum to the material in the RFQ, and then the RFQ will be issued. And there's a you know, a process that's outlined by the state as far as how we issue an RFQ. And obviously it would then be placed on the town's website. I believe it's published in this, what's called the State Monitor, but I will double check on that with our DPW director. And then, you know, we set up the time for people to respond. And then from there, you would do your interviews.
Okay. Does the board have any comments on the response or questions? Does the staff have any comments on the response?
No, I don't.
This is a public hearing. Do any attendees have any comments on the response? Okay, it doesn't look like there's anyone in the public with any comments. So in terms of progressing this forward, what is there a vote that is required? I have no further questions. In fact, thank you for putting this together. I realize these circumstances, none of us anticipated elongating it to this, you know, extreme. I think that we were obviously all put into a surprise environment that none of us expected. So I appreciate this level of response. Thank you.
Thank you. The whole Steris team, you know, the answers about the facility in Switzerland. And so a lot of different members of their company provided the answers.
Great. Thank you. Whoever is on the line as well, who helped to contribute to this. Okay. So in terms of moving forward, is there a motion or a vote that you need to start the process, or are we prepared to just move forward?
I think just for clarification or to put it, you know, in the minutes, just a, you know, consensus from the board that, you know, you're moving forward with the, you know, we'll be issuing the RFQ and moving forward with the peer review process.
Okay, do you just need board consensus, or do you want a motion? Do you need a motion for the record?
You can do a motion.
Okay, so let me pull it back here. Okay, is there a motion to move forward with the RFQ, to incorporate this memorandum with our previous materials and move forward with the RFQ process for 425 Whitney Street?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Millie was the second. Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? I'm going to do a roll call. Amy?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Millie?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
And Carrie's an aye. Okay, so in terms of plotting out next steps, we start the RFQ process. Timeline wise, what does that look like for, you know, how do we progress the hearing forward? Do we continue it to, what kind of timeline does that look like?
Well, if I could, Carrie, one suggestion that I would make, I know back at, I think it was probably at one of the February meetings, I had provided information from town council about the, given there was a question from the board and from a resident about pending litigation, and, you know, is the board able to move forward with the site plan approval process? And the response, you know, was yes from a little bit more detail, but yes from town council. And at that time, I think one or two of the members was asking for additional details from town council, but then it sort of got, you know, just lost. And again, the, you know, pandemic came. So I'm thinking if you're to have an executive session for the other litigation on the 21st, if you want to also just, you know, for transparency purposes here tonight, do you want to ask town council that, you know, for additional detail or verification on what he provided me back in February?
Sure, does that sound reasonable to the board? Okay.
So you could, again, essentially, you know, we'll we'll have that executive session at 5:30, and you could continue this to July. We're just looking at the calendar here.
Well, so if it goes to RFQ now, is there, about how long does that take? So do we check in?
I think what we had talked about, and I have to, I don't have the RFQ in front of me. But I think that we gave it a 3-week process, a 3-week turnaround, if I'm not mistaken. But we had talked about, again, the DPW director had recommended what the time frame was. So if I have it incorrect, I'll double check with him this week about that. But I believe it was about a 3-week turnaround. So you could, I mean, given what else is happening this week and with other meetings, I won't have it out this week. I will look at having it out at the beginning of next week. So you may want to continue this. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know if there's a benefit to continue it to your first meeting in August. There might be.
Okay, and if the goal of that meeting is to present to go through the options, or to actually have a final pick? Like, is there anything we can do in the interim so that we're moving it forward?
There isn't anything that the board, once we issue it, it's a matter of getting back the responses and then scheduling the interviews.
Okay.
Could I ask through the chair? Just a question to Kathy. Sometimes you can, if you know of a engineering firm or a company that might be interested, you can send it to them unsolicited, right? Under the bid laws. I don't know if you had anyone in mind that might help the process, because this is going to be a pretty comprehensive peer review. So maybe in your experience, there's someone you'd want to send it to, and that will prompt a response.
There's definitely companies that I have in the interim that I have just myself researched as far as on the internet, because again, as Steve, you just said, this isn't a typical engineer peer review that we would send it out to the sort of the usual suspects as people refer to them as. So there's I think there's certainly specific companies, and I'll continue my my research on that to get those companies, but we would also send it out just in general.
Okay, so does it sound most reasonable? Because I don't want to keep making everybody come back and then not have an answer. So would an August 4th timeline be a reasonable one where we can kind of anticipate we can go forward from there?
Yes. Yeah. We should have, if this goes out the week of the 29th, we will definitely have responses back for August, prior to August 4th. I mean, they would probably be coming. And I think to be on the safe side, Carrie, we shouldn't go for the July meeting. We should go for August 4th. And then I can just provide updates to the board as far as, the number of responses that have been received, when it went out, what's the time frame? Because again, I just want to verify whether it was 3 weeks or not.
Okay. Does August 1st, 4th sound okay for your team?
I think it's okay for me. I haven't heard from others yet, but we're looking forward to advancing it. So that I appreciate Kathy's effort there for as kind of quick a turnaround as we can get to get someone on board for peer review. So if that's what it takes, I understand it's town meeting season suddenly, so.
Unexpectedly.
Yes. So short answer, yes.
Okay. So why don't we plan on continuing to August 4th with the expectation that we'll have that RFQ piece ready to roll with a selection by then. Is there a motion to continue the hearing for 425 Whitney Street special permit site plan approval and special permit for groundwater protection overlay to August 4th at, we'll continue to say 6 p.m. Does that seem to work for the board in these Zoom settings? 6, does that work as far as you can tell, Stephen? 6 would be okay? 6 p.m.?
I think I can make it back from the Cape by 6. No, 6 is fine.
Is that your vacation week? That's terrible.
No, that's all right. Yeah. First week of August always is, but it's been ruined before. That's all right. And actually, I could do this from the Cape, right?
I'm sure you
I'll
don't
bring my-
mean that the planning board would ruin your vacation.
I'll bring, yeah. I'll bring my suit coat to the Cape and my laptop.
Okay. All right. So why don't a motion to continue to August 4th at 6 p.m.
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? I'll do a roll call. Amy?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Millie?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
And Carrie's an aye. So we will continue to August 4th.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank
Good
you.
luck with your outdoor town meeting
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
challenges.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, let's see. So we are at the very tail end. Kathy, do you have additional business that would be pertinent to this evening?
I do not.
Okay. Do we want to skip the minutes or do we want to just get them in this last couple of minutes?
I know I just sent them out. Oops, I forgot if I was on mute. I mean, I'm very excited that we had them in less than 7 days. But I did just send them out yesterday to you. So I don't know if anyone's had a chance to even look at them.
Did everyone get to read them yet or no?
I started, but I have not finished.
Okay. Why don't we need to end anyway at 9:30. So why don't, if the board's okay, why don't we continue the minutes until our next meeting? Oh, Michelle, you're not going to be there though. Is that okay?
Well, do you still want to meet on July 7th? I mean, we've put everything off tonight from July 7th.
I think so, only because, wait, we have nothing on July 7th?
Correct.
The only thing is we're just technically coming off of town elections. So I don't know if that's a good point to still meet. Why don't we keep it and then where are we now? We still have a couple weeks. So maybe we keep it for now. Everyone's missed their deadline to be on the agenda?
Yes, correct. Yeah, you wouldn't have any public hearings or any even just site plan approvals. There's no time
All right.
to get on
Well,
that
if anything
agenda.
comes up or if we have minutes or anything and coming at the ZBA or anything like that, we'll at least just have that held for now. Okay. Amy.
I just had a couple of questions. There is a ZBA meeting coming up. And do you think there are going to be applicants that have site plans for the planning board to review? Kathy, I know you had sent me a couple, but it hadn't gone out yet.
The agenda for the July 1st ZBA meeting is the agenda that would have happened in March. The agenda hasn't been posted yet, but there were 2 applications on that agenda that the board had originally asked to have the applicants in. One of those applicants withdrew their application, which was 90 West Main Street. And the other applicant for, I think it's 82, but I'm not 100% positive, but I think it's 82 Coolidge Circle. They submitted a request, a variance request to allow the accessory dwelling unit that they were building to be larger. It exceeded the square footage that was in the zoning, but they wanted to move forward with the project. And so what they did with working with Bob is they scaled back the size of their addition And so they have moved, I'm not sure if they've started building yet or not, but I know they moved forward with the use with Bob. It's, I mean, they can do the use, it's an allowed use. So they technically are moving forward with their project, but they still do have their application before the Zoning Board of Appeals, which was for, I think it was 72, no, Bob, I forgot. Do you know how many extra square feet they were? I mean, there's like 30 extra square feet. It might have even been smaller than that.
If I remember right, it was like 20, somewhere between 20 and 40 extra square feet.
Yeah.
That they exceeded the allowable size for an accessory dwelling unit. So they need a special permit for the permission to do it. Plus they need a variance because they wanted to increase the size over what's prescribed in the zoning code.
So they're still, I believe they're still going forward. We re-advertised it for the July 1st meeting.
They're going forward with the construction, but the current plans that they sent to me is simply an addition onto a house, and it does not have the appearance of a accessory dwelling unit. So as an addition, they can do that by right without going to any of the boards. But eventually, if they do want to turn it into an accessory dwelling unit, which I believe they do, they'd still have to go to the boards.
And then the only extra application that did come in was for they have to get a special, the use is allowed by right, which is a granite countertop company that just a a retail business that wants to move into office space at 329 West Main Street, and they had to apply for a special permit because they're in a groundwater district. So
Now, didn't they need a site plan too? I thought it said special permit was site plan.
So,
well, anytime someone applies for a special permit, a site plan gets attached to it. So
Yeah.
that particular use though is they're moving into existing office space.
Now, what about, I have a quick question with that, is from what I read, I only have the heads up because I saw the groundwater. I saw it through groundwater, but it sounds like they're going to be bonding granite countertops together. That's not considered a manufacturing use. Like, I know there was a molding company where Cedar on 425, where it was wood and they were building moldings. So that was considered light manufacturing. I understand that a granite sale would be commercial, but when they're building countertops and they're using bonding and actually creating countertops, would that be considered manufacturing?
I'll defer to Bob or Fred, who's reviewing that. I don't.
You can let the ZBA figure that out.
Okay, but it did have a site plan, so should it come in front of the planning board too?
Well, like I said, the way the zoning is written is anytime someone applies for a special permit, site plan approval gets attached by the special permit granting authority. In this particular case, they're moving into an existing building. They're not doing anything to the building. They're not putting an addition on. They're not planting a single flower. I mean, they're not doing anything. They're moving into an existing building.
So the granite's not going to be out front on the roadway. You know how some of the companies line the granite pieces up along the front?
I have no idea, Amy. That they haven't come to the ZBA yet. I mean, we'll know that July 1st.
Amy, I can speak to that a little bit. Having just got a granite countertop installed in my kitchen, I can tell you that they do that bonding in home, not in the shop. That way they don't have to transport it while it's bonded. So they cut the pieces to the right size and shape, then they bond them together when they get on site. As far as I can tell from speaking to the attorney, he has not mentioned anything about stockpiling any granite in front of that building. Matter of fact, they only have access to a small portion of the building that's in the front. Most of what they're leasing is space behind the building where they have a table and a big saw and a system that reclaims the water that they use to cut the granite. So they did not indicate any stockpile of material in front or even in back of the building.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other business? Okay, great. Is there a motion to close the meeting?
I make a motion to close the meeting.
Second?
Second?
Okay, all in favor, Amy,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Millie,
Aye.
and Carrie's an aye. Okay, thank you, everybody. Sorry to keep you here a few extra minutes, David. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.